Well, good evening, members, and a very happy new year to you all, and welcome to this meeting of full council. I am Councillor Andrew Hensman, Chairman of the Council, and I will be chairing the meeting this evening. This meeting is being webcast and it will be broadcast via the Council's YouTube channel, so a happy new year to everybody watching at home. I would like to welcome all those in attendance, and I understand we have representatives from Fearing Parish Council with us this evening to observe the Council's consideration of the Fearing Neighbourhood Plan under item 9 on the agenda, as well as a number of public speakers. I would also like to welcome those watching the meeting virtually. I'd also like to take this opportunity to welcome our two newest councillors following the two by-elections back in November, which is Councillor Dennis Abram, representing Coggeshall, and Councillor Martin Green, representing Braintree South, to their first meeting of full council. So this meeting is scheduled for 3 hours, and we have a packed agenda. So there's a lot to get through this evening. Therefore, I'd be grateful if everyone could ensure that they keep their speeches concise and to the issues being considered. If members wish to speak this evening, please can you indicate by clearly raising your hand. And as we have a full agenda, I'll take the first speaker immediately, but please keep your hands raised until you're acknowledged, as Kim Mayo will compile the list of those that wish to speak on the item and ensure that everybody is called. We're not expecting the fire alarm. However, in the event of an alarm, please leave via the fire exits and assemble in the car park. Can I also remind everyone to ensure they have their mobile phone switched to silent? So I will now proceed to the first item of business, agenda item 1, which is apologies for absence. So I have Councillor Mrs Jenny Sandham, Councillor Peter Tattersley, Councillor Trevor McCardle, Councillor Richard Van Dulken, Councillor Mrs Wendy Scattergood, Councillor Andy Munday, Councillor Lynn Walters, Councillor Justin Wrench and Councillor Patrick Horner. Are there any further apologies? Councillor Dervish.
Apologies from Councillor James Coleridge. Thank you.
Thank you. Oh,
he's had to shoot away for personal reasons.
Oh, apologies, because I was going to say the team earlier.
Yeah, no, he was here.
Right. Right, and also Councillor Santamora.
Councillor Corsina and...
Oh, sorry.
Oh, well, he's here. Sorry.
He's behind you. Is that everybody? All decided whether we're here or not? Councillor Smith?
Sorry, Councillor Butland, did you say Councillor Kilmartin?
I think it began with K, yes. Councillor Kilmartin, who rang me earlier, her car is not working and she's unable to come. Yes.
Yeah. Thank you. I'll take that as the complete list. Thank you, members. We'll proceed to agenda item number 2, which is minutes of the previous meeting. Please can I have a proposer to approve the minutes as an accurate record of the meeting of full council held on a long time ago, 10th of October 2022. Thank you, Councillor Butland. And can I have a seconder? Councillor Cunningham, thank you. The minutes have been moved and seconded as an accurate record. All those in favour, please indicate. All those against? Okay, we have an extra member. We welcome Councillor Siri. Never mind. The minutes are approved, so I'll now sign them. Thank you, members. We'll proceed to item 3, which is the declaration of interest. Do any members have any disclosable pecuniary interest, other pecuniary interest or non-pecuniary interest that they wish to declare this evening? If so, please can you state the item and the nature of your interest? Councillor Cunningham.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Can I declare a non-pecuniary interest as a member of Essex County Council who are mentioned and will be mentioned in various items this evening? Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Batman.
Similar declaration as a member of Essex County Council.
Councillor Thorogood.
In relation to agenda item number 9, approval of the Fearing Neighbourhood Plan, I'm the ward member for Fearing and Kelvedon, also the Essex County Councillor for Braintree Eastern, which covers Fearing, and also chair of Kelvedon Against Urban Sprawl, which also includes Fearing, and also just generally in terms of being an Essex County member for the other items as indicated. Thank you.
Thank you. And Councillor Schreier.
Same as Councillor Butland and Cunningham, just as a member of Essex County Council for the various items mentioned. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other members? Thank you, members. We'll proceed to item 4, which is public question time. So, members, tonight we have 8 registered speakers for this evening's meeting. Registered speakers have 3 minutes each to make their statements or ask a question. A warning bell will be sounded at the expiry of the 3 minutes, and the registered speaker must cease speaking at that time if they have not already done so. 4 of our speakers are talking in relation to the Ministry of Justice's Wethersfield prison proposal. We will start with these, and then Councillor Butland will provide a response to this topic once all 4 speakers have spoken. So the first speaker I have is Mr. John Warner. If you'd like to come forward to the speaker's table, and you have 3 minutes to ask your question or make your statement on the proposed status of the prison review.
Thank you, Chair and Councillors. My name is John Warner. I'm standing as the Conservative candidate for the 3 fields and in the forthcoming elections. I live in Finchingfield, and I am an owner-operator of a small to medium-sized enterprise in the local community. And my question, obviously, today is regarding the proposed prison development of the former airbase. And as I understand it, obviously, there's no application as yet been submitted, and there are various sites around the country that are currently being considered. And it is unfortunate that the sword of Damocles seems to be hanging over that in a rather long period without any kind of progress on what's going on with the site. But I'd like to put it on record that as the Conservative candidate for the 3 fields, I'm firmly against that mega development and any kind of large-scale project development of the site simply because of the infrastructure. And I'd also like to put on record that I'm willing to work with any other party, cross-party, in the local community to support any rejection of any development of such a scale. Simply the road infrastructure is unable to support and carry that sort of weight of traffic going on, and it would irrevocably destroy the community and the fabric of what makes up our local 3 fields. Notwithstanding that, I also appreciate the very difficult position that the council finds itself in that you can't comment on something particularly or officially without it being actually proposed. And whilst I do understand and respect that those that are on the planning committee that sit within the council here are and should remain completely objective so that they can look at any application properly and give it due care and consideration. The question that I've got to the council is what is the policy of the council for other individual members that are not sitting on the planning committee to make their own informed opinions known to their constituents, as this development won't just affect the 3 fields, it will affect the entire Braintree area. And as such, I think with the forthcoming elections coming up, it's important that our electorate are fully informed as to where they stand with their respective parties. So I'd welcome that question if it could be answered at the end of the 3 other questions that are coming. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Warner. The second speaker is Mr. Alan Mackenzie. Please come forward. And you have 3 minutes to ask your question or make your statement, again, on the Ministry of Justice undertaking detailed contamination inspections and tests on Wethersfield Airbase.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Happy New Year. Has the Ministry of Justice undertaken detailed contamination inspections and tests on the airbase? Has it alerted Braintree District Council to any contaminants found? The scoping opinion reply to the MOJ factored in oil, lubricants and fuels. It did not include perfluorinated and polyfluorinated alkyl substances, PFAS, also known as forever chemicals, because they are designed never to break down in the environment. When PFAS enter the environment, they accumulate in soil, water, animals and human blood. A huge study was carried out in the US that linked PFAS to ulcerative colitis, thyroid disease, testicular cancer and kidney cancer, amongst other dangers to health. It has been estimated that almost everyone in the world now has PFAS in their blood. Yes, that's all of you and me. A Freedom of Information Act request was sent to the MOJ about contamination. Its reply refused to supply the information, which it confirmed it had, saying, "This information is commercially sensitive and release would prejudice the authorities' negotiating position on the project. Release would also prejudice the authorities' negotiating position and ability to achieve value for money in future prison builds. Release could also prejudice the MOD's ability to achieve value for money should they choose to sell the land to another party." What sort of people are you dealing with that refuse to release information on contamination? Now, SWAP has undertaken water sampling on directly adjacent land to the airbase and sent samples to an accredited European laboratory for testing of PFAS. There are multiple class actions in the US, and cases are now being brought around the world as these contaminants have been found on air bases, particularly due to the use of firefighting foam. Cambridge Water recently shut down an aquifer next to Duxford Airfield because the PFAS levels were 4 times the regulatory limit of 100 nanograms per litre of water, so 400 nanograms. The swap sample taken was 480 nanograms. I'm sure the local farmer involved will be interested in talking to the MOD about that. I understand the airfield stands on a bed of clay. Therefore, the best course of action to deter these chemicals leaching is to not disturb the soil, as they will be held in place by the clay. Will the Council instruct the MOD and the MOJ to undertake a comprehensive site testing of these chemicals to protect the local environment and the local people and not support further development of the airbase? Bearing in mind the airbase falls within the Pant water catchment area and the River Pant delivers drinking water to the Abberton and Hanningfield reservoirs, I can't believe the Council wishes to be complicit in pollution of people's drinking water. It might also wish to consider the consequences for personal liabilities for negligence if ignored. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mackenzie. And the next speaker we have is Mr. Michael Allpress. If you'd like to come forward, and you have 3 minutes to ask your question or make your statement on the Ministry of Justice.
Hi, good evening, Mr. Chairman and councillors. Thank you. Just want to say to start with that I understand that the leader of the council recently sent a letter to the Ministry of Justice, and it must be quite embarrassing to have been led the merry dance by the MOJ and the MOD, not keeping you well informed. I want to know, when did the council first realise that the Ministry of Justice was treating Wethersfield Airbase as a backup site to the 6 other sites the MOJ has targeted for its 10,000 new prison places programme? Given that the 3 sites currently under appeal all have existing prisons and none of them are anywhere near as remotely located as Wethersfield Airbase, should any of those sites under appeal be turned down, how on earth could Braintree District Council possibly justify Wethersfield as a suitable site? Documents submitted to the Harborough prison planning appeal, the MOJ has stated that Wethersfield is a backup site or a site for a future programme. It does not say for a future prison programme. How does the council feel about the MOJ and the MOD surreptitiously trying to achieve a planning permission at this airbase for a large, unnecessary development, which the MOD could then use as a pretence for a change of use to something completely different, Does the council support this subterfuge being carried out and the waste of its time and taxpayers' money? Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Allpress. Next speaker is Mr. Nick Chapman. He's come forward, and you have 3 minutes to ask your question or make your statement on Wethersfield Airbase and construction traffic.
Happy New Year, everybody. Is the council aware, contrary to what Victoria Atkins, then Justice Minister, said in a reply to Kemi Badenoch, MP for Saffron Walden in April, that the prisons at Wethersfield Airbase would take 1 year of early works, then main construction would likely take 2.5 years for each prison, so 6 years. That the Ministry of Justice has now stated it would take 10 years to build the 2 prisons at Wethersfield Airbase. In a document from the Market Harbour Prison Appeal, James Smith, Deputy Director, His Majesty's Prison and Probation Service, Prison Supply Directorate, in referring to Wethersfield, says the following: should planning be applied for and granted, we could not build 2 prisons on the site at the same time. A Category C resettlement prison would be the priority, meaning the supply of any Category B places would be at the least 10 years in the future. This would blight the area with construction traffic for the first 5 years for 1 mega prison, then traffic to the built prison plus construction traffic for the building of the second prison for another 5 years. Considering the public anger which already exists about the level of traffic in Braintree, is the council seriously going to support this blight, which will happen not only to the villages in and around the airbase, but also the towns, including Braintree itself? Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chapman. I now invite Councillor Batland to respond to these statements. And please can I remind the speakers that they have no right of reply. Councillor Batland.
Thank you, Chairman, and thank you to all 4 speakers from the public this evening. I'll answer each question in turn, if I may, so that hopefully all speakers will feel that I have addressed the issues that they've raised. First of all, to Mr. Warner, who I very much hope to see here as a strong advocate for 3 fields post-May. He clearly is a person of independent mind who will not be taking orders necessarily on how he should think, and indeed neither will any other member of this council or indeed any candidates be told how they should think on this. It will be and remains up to individuals to express their view. Clearly there are different views on prisons. I note, for example, and I have some sympathy with the MOJ, who actually wanted to close a prison down on Dartmoor earlier last year in 2022, but met huge local opposition to the closing of that, simply because, I assume, because of the jobs that it meant for the local community. So individual candidates of all parties, I am sure, will want to judge that issue from their own perspective and that of their constituents. And I do appreciate that the closer one lives to an area, the stronger the feelings that individual constituents will have. The further away, there is a chance that it is less of an issue, and that will be up to individual candidates to decide how they do it. But Mr. Warner clearly intends, and I welcome that, to be a very strong advocate for the local community there. If I can move on to question 2, that was from Mr. Mackenzie regarding contamination. Contamination on the site is clearly something which this council will take very seriously. As those who have read the environmental statement scoping paperwork will see, the MOJ wished to de-scope the issue of contamination from the environmental statement. This council, however, requires that it should be considered as part of any future environmental statement to ensure that more detailed work is undertaken and the impact of any contamination is carefully and fully understood. Separately, slightly separately, we also have been assured that as part of the decommissioning of the site, and indeed similar sites, the MOD undertake a full review and survey of the site to ensure that it is cleared of specialist materials and equipment, including, for example, unexploded ordnance. Moving on to the third question from Mr. Oldpress, which was, when did BDC first become aware that the MOJ were treating Wethersfield Air Base as a backup site? This council has never been formally notified as to the role of any proposal that Wethersfield Air Base plays within the MOJ's present programme, although we note the position expressed at its appeals by the MOJ, and it's specifically that approach which led me to write to the Secretary of State on the 22nd of December about these proposals to say it was putting an unfair blight upon the area and needed to be sorted. I'm delighted that following the lead of this council, the local Member of Parliament has also indicated that he is raising exactly similar concerns with the Secretary of State. On the final question, which was from Mr. Chapman, about basically how long any construction period would take, the answer to that is if a planning application is received, it will need to show the impact of the development, including the construction phase of the development. This would be considered by the Highway Authority and this council to see whether it would have an acceptable or unacceptable impact on the local highway, environment, and most importantly, residents, in line with the policy set out in local and national policies. Hopefully, Chairman, I have responded directly to the 4 questions that have been raised.
Thank you, Councillor Butland. The next public speaker we have is Councillor Lee Blackburn of Fearing Parish Council, and you wish to speak in relation to the Fearing Neighbourhood Plan. Please come forward, and you have 3 minutes to ask your question or make your statement.
Thank you for this opportunity to speak about the Fearing Neighbourhood Plan. As stated before, on other local neighbourhood plan adoptions, this has been a long time in the making. It began in 2015 when we set up a working group expecting about 200 houses at most. We were soon to realise that we had been designated as a strategic growth location of 1,000 homes. On a village of 900 homes, this was more than doubling the size. I am very proud of our village for taking the seriousness of this on board and turning up to exhibitions, having their say and helping us to gather the information needed for such a daunting task. We managed to complete Regulation 14, literally as COVID lockdown began. I'm even prouder of the Fearing Neighbourhood Plan workshop, who with the Parish Council went over and above the call of duty to get this done through challenging times. The outcome of which was a 94.5% votes in favour, which is an overwhelming majority of the community that voted. I would like to thank Braintree District Council officers, and in particular Gary Song and Anna Massau, for their help on several aspects. Thanks should also go to DAC Planning and AR Urbanism, who understood our location and difficulties and went that extra mile. The adoption of the Fearing Neighbourhood Plan is extremely important to our village in light of the strategic growth location, as this is our protection against speculative and unsustainable development. Our watchwords are community, sustainability, and continuing to protect our open and green spaces. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Blackburn. I'd like to invite Councillor Mrs Spray, Cabinet Member for Planning and Infrastructure, to respond to Councillor Blackburn's statement.
Thank you, Chairman. I'd like to thank Councillor Blackburn for her statement and in particular for the work by the Fearing Group in producing this neighbourhood plan. It is a really excellent document. I also appreciate her kind words of thanks to the officers who always work very hard with the communities to try and produce the best possible plan. I will have more to say about it when we reach that item on the agenda. Don't know if Councillor Blackburn is intending to stay for that, but I hope she will, and she's very welcome to do so. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Spray. And thank you, Councillor Blackburn, for your statement. Next public speaker is Mr. Robert Mitchell, and you wish to speak in relation to litter picking. Please come forward to the speaker's table. You have 3 minutes to ask your question and make your statement.
I'm hoping that what I've got to say can be both said and answered much quicker than the previous items. Following on from my letter to the Braintree and Wisdom Times last month, I suspect that members may have seen or read or seen on the news a new name for an activity in the exercise area called plogging. It's a mashup of litter picking and jogging brought to light by an Indian student in Bristol, enterprising though he seems. Mr. Gurraf and his like-minded volunteers picked up 5 tonnes of rubbish last year, including 3 tonnes of plastic while out running in Bristol, and he's planning to visit many areas of the UK in the months ahead. While this council sees excellent results from a network of generous volunteer litter pickers, I wondered if the council might be willing to support any plogger individuals or groups with litter pickers, gloves and bag hoops, which is now the proper terminology that I was unaware of until this morning, thus supporting both healthy exercise while clearing their neighbourhood of litter, which, very sadly, does not seem to notably diminish without volunteers of all speeds. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mitchell, and I'm sure Councillor Mrs. Schmidt, you'll be pleased to take this one. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. Indeed, Mr. Mitchell and my views on people who drop litter is much the same. Yes, Bristol, I suppose, is very lucky, being a university city, that it has a lot of young people who are running round, and I absolutely commend them, the fact that they think about picking litter up as they do it. As indeed Mr. Mitchell alluded to, we have our wonderful Green Heart volunteers, from incredibly young members to our most wonderful older member, who I saw just before Christmas with his roller chair out and his blue plastic bag, still picking up litter. And so, yes, if we have any young enthusiastic runners who would like to collect litter whilst they're running, or if there's any ploggers from Bristol would like to visit us, then they will, like all our volunteers, be welcome with open arms, and we'll, of course, happily provide them with all the necessary kit. We can never have too many volunteers. Thank you, Chairman.
Quite right, thank you, Councillor Mrs. Schmidt, and thank you, Mr. Mitchell, for your statement. Next speaker I have is Mr. David Holland. You wish to speak about the land usage in the context of security of supply of food, security and security of supply of energy, and the need for balance in the council's approach to these two critical uses. Please come forward to the speaker's table, and you have 3 minutes to ask your question or make your statement.
Thank you and good evening, Council. Whilst the majority of the electorate in Braintree District live in urban settings like this, the majority of the land in this area that this Council has responsibility for is rural. Land use is therefore a major responsibility for this Council. Security of supply is today a significant concern, whether it be security of supply of energy or security of supply of food. These concerns must be balanced with respect to land use. Currently, we see planning outcomes which suggest a prioritisation of energy over food. In an area of predominantly high-grade farmland, that imbalance seems problematic. We see numerous proposals coming forward for energy infrastructure, which is sited on high-grade agricultural land. I'm here to call for a balanced approach to land use, and use that does not allow the energy industry to overwhelm other considerations. The natural beauty of the rural areas of the district confer benefits beyond food and energy on all residents. Those benefits include the well-being which supports everyone's mental health. Alien industrial infrastructure in the rural landscape is detrimental to this, and it requires effective screening and mitigation if it is not to be detrimental to natural beauty and our well-being. So what does getting it right look like? Well, Braintree District Council is to be commended on the manner in which it recently determined the Twinsted substation application from National Grid. Planning Committee members embraced calls from affected communities and deferred their planning decision, effectively, my interpretation, until National Grid agreed to move the substation compound back further from the road. This to facilitate an almost doubling of the depth of tree screening. It was heartwarming to see the extent to which the committee had embraced the issue and supported the views of residents and the electorate. However, I'm here to ask you to do more. The north of the district is blighted with pylons. Some won't need to be there in future because they will be made redundant by the substation. UK Power Networks recently refused to remove these pylons on what we argue are spurious grounds. We believe the real reason is that these pylons earn UK Power Networks money, irrespective of whether or not they facilitate the distribution of energy. We therefore seek your support for the removal of all energy infrastructure when it becomes redundant as a consequence of development or reaches the end of its life. In support of this objective, we ask that you press UK Power Networks for the removal of the soon-to-be redundant pylons right across Twinstead Parish. You helped to start the job of mitigating this industrial energy development in the countryside. Please help us finish it. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Holland. I'd like to invite Councillor Butland if you'd like to respond to the statement.
I think Councillor Mrs. Spray is going to respond.
Okay, Councillor Mrs. Spray.
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you, Councillor Butland. I'd like to thank Mr. Holland for his statement and the excellent points that he makes. I very much appreciate his remarks regarding the Planning Committee. As always, with these things, it's a balancing act for the committee in making decisions based on planning law versus the impact that any development, but particularly proposals like this, might have on the local community. The particular proposal he mentions is an NSIP, that's a nationally significant infrastructure project. So we as a local authority are consultees on this, but we continue to lobby for the best possible outcome. What I will say is that I am very happy to write to UK Power Networks regarding the removal of pylons, as suggested by Mr. Holland, and I'm certainly very pleased to be able to say I will do that. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Mrs. Spray, and thank you, Councillor Mr. Thank you, Mr. Holland, for your statement. The final speaker we have is Councillor Mrs. Bell.
Mr. Chairman, I have to declare an interest in UK Power Networks. I didn't know it was going to be mentioned, so I couldn't do it at the correct time. But I just want it noted that I do have a connection. Thank you.
Pun intended. You have a connection. That's true. We all, by definition, we all have a connection, don't we? Okay. We digress. But back to our final speaker for this evening, which is Councillor Krista Marie Dobson of Fearing Parish Council, and you wish to speak about green waste charges. So you have 3 minutes to ask your question or make your statement. Thank you.
Thank you. Happy New Year all. On behalf of the Fearing Litter Picking Group, I would like to express disappointment at BDC's Performance Management Scrutiny Committees of considering extra charges fees for green waste collections. Effectively, this is already a service paid for within our council tax, and as stated by Councillor Butland, it won't be means tested, and the committee's train of thought goes against government proposals. In May 2021, a government press release stated that they are considering free green waste collections to all householders as part of the environmental bill to boost recycling. The idea is frustrating for those that pay their way in taxes already, and unfair on those that are already stretched financially. Families that are already on a tight budget will not be able to pay for this additional service. The proposal squeezes the families that are already paying higher rates of council tax in a cost of living crisis. It is also frustrating for those of us that were encouraged to learn that BDC wanted to recycle 75% of the district's waste. Every action has a consequence. And for us volunteer litter pickers, we can foresee the following. Green waste ending up concealed in black bins and not being recycled. Green waste dumped and left for litter pickers, landowners and the street cleaning team to deal with. Given that the street cleaning team have stated that they have stretched due to the increase in development in the district. This is a concern. It also means that once again the onus will be put on local residents, parish and town councils to report fly tipping, already an increased admin cost to them. With the street cleaning team already stretched, fly tipping of this kind can lead to dangerous road safety issues, passing points blocked, lines of sight issues with drivers, as well as the potential for fires if not collected in an appropriate space of time. Potential issues with the pest control and neighbour relations if green waste is not composted correctly. Not everyone has the inkling or knowledge to compost effectively and safely, and hence composting by professionals is advisable, as they understand the environmental requirements. A reduction in air quality due to the increased traffic on the roads making trips backwards and forth to the local dump, and an increase in bonfire activity. Us volunteers have also a few questions. We would like to know if restrictions on vehicle access to all refuse centres will be removed to allow residents to dispose of their waste in their own vehicles free of charge and without booking. As if restrictions are not removed, fly tipping will certainly increase, along with waste being collected by people without a waste licence. If there isn't the volume of uptake on paying for the service, will the charge be more than the £45 proposed? And will the street cleaning team be given extra resources to deal with increased fly tipping issues in a timely manner? And what will happen to the existing green bins? Will they be removed if households are not prepared to pay for the fee? Would they be dumped in farmers' fields or on verges along with the green waste itself? If the bins are taken back, what will BDC do with them? Would they be recycled? Would BDC not look at more entrepreneurial ideas with the green waste and to provide a topsoil service to residents for a fee to claw back funds? It was noted by BDC's committee that other councils charged for the green waste collections. Have Mould and Utterford tendering seen an increase in fly tipping and bonfire activity in their districts?
Councillor Dobson, can I wind you up there, please?
Yeah.
Thank
you.
And I'd like to invite Councillor Butland to respond to your statement, and can I remind you that you have no right of reply? Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. Can I thank Councillor Dobson for the points that she's made? Can I also congratulate her on the work that she has done in her own area? And I watched the presentation she made to our scrutiny committee here, which I found extremely interesting. I need to make a couple of things clear from the start. Any decision regarding charging of green waste will be part of a budget by this council, to be approved by this council or not, as the case may be. But I do just want to make a couple of things. First of all, the collection of green waste is not a statutory responsibility for any local authority in this country. There is no way in which an authority has to collect green waste if it doesn't wish to. In terms of charging, at this moment, 232 of the 326 local authorities in this country do charge. Nearly 70% charge. In fact, it's probably a little higher than that if you take out some of the London boroughs who don't do green collection, simply because, quite frankly, there's not a lot of green in parts of London. So a third point that was made was the government's proposals about making green waste free. That was a proposal in 2019. It has not as yet been implemented. There are rumours that local authorities will be allowed to take their own decisions on that. Clearly, if a local authority, Mr. Chairman, was to say, if the government were to say you cannot charge, we would not charge. If the government say, however, it will be a matter for local authorities, then we will take that decision. Councillor Dobson also mentioned the cost, and she mentioned a figure of £45. We haven't yet come forward with a final figure. I can assure her, though, that it will not be as expensive as £70 for a bin as it is in Green Party-controlled Brighton. Neither will it be as expensive as £73 a year as it is in Labour/Green-controlled Hastings. because I think that, quite frankly, is not on. And particularly in Brighton, where if you want a second and third bin, you also pay an additional £70 for every bin that you want. So I can assure her that if we do introduce it, it will not be at that rate. Clearly, as I say, there are a number of local authorities, 232 of them, most of whom have introduced it since 2016. We will clearly want to learn from the examples that those authorities have taken on the impact, if any, that it has had. I do want, however, just to pay particular, go back to the Hastings one, because when you look at their website, and I remind you, their garden waste scheme is £73 a month, but they do make a very fair point. In response to the question, why do you charge for this scheme? That council says, the Controlled Waste Regulations 2012 allow for a charge to be made for the collection of garden waste. This makes sure that residents who do not have a garden, who home compost already, or do not wish to use this service, do not pay for it through their council tax. So there is a choice then. At the moment, everybody in this district pays for green waste collection. £500,000 is paid for collectively, whether that is for someone with a 50-acre garden or with hardly room in the backyard to put a dog kennel. I don't think that's fair. So if we do decide to introduce it, fairness will be one of the things we will want to look at. Fairness in terms of the price, and also the opportunity, if people don't wish to take it off, not to take it off. So there's a long way to go yet, but hopefully that just gives some idea of the things that this council will need to take account of when it comes to any budget decisions relating to charging for green waste. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Butland. And of course, the charge will be for a decision later on for this council to take should it come forward. So the reply by Councillor Butland concludes this evening's public question time session. So can I thank all the speakers once again for their questions this evening. You're all welcome to remain and watch the meeting. Alternatively, skedaddle out that door whilst you've got the chance. So with that, we can now proceed to agenda item 5, announcements and statements from the chairman and the leader of the council. So with my announcements, it is with very great sadness that we shared the news at the tail end of last year of the death of the Mayor of Chelmsford, Councillor John Galley, who passed away in October after a period of illness. And our thoughts are with his wife, Jackie, and their family. And I was quite privileged to have one of the last photos taken with him at one of the engagements for Her Majesty the Queen. Since my last council announcements, I've attended a total of 18 engagements since October. Some of the highlights being the Remembrance Service held by the Royal British Legion, and it was warming to see so many people in attendance, including the MP James Cleverly, and a wonderful event to remember those who have fallen. I've attended lots of Christmas festivities, including visiting officers and staff across the council. The Halstead Torchlight Procession, how can I not get a mention in for Halstead? And the annual Christmas community event in Braintree Town Centre, which was a huge success. I just could have done with that cardboard tube to press the button, so that's my only feedback from that. So I'd now like to invite Councillor Graham Butland, Leader of the Council, to make any announcements. And I've been advised that Councillor Butland will be providing an update on devolution and levelling up, and I've agreed that if any members have any questions relating to devolution, that you can ask them immediately afterwards, but anything for the levelling up goes forward to the Cabinet report at the end. I do apologise. Right, do apologise, there's another bit. Councillor Button has also provided an update on the cost of living crisis, and it's that members take their questions through to the relevant item, being agenda item 12, the Cabinet response to the cost of living joint scrutiny review, and agenda item 15, Cabinet's report. So with that, over to you, Councillor Button.
Thank you, Chairman. If I can deal first of all with devolution and also the Memorandum of Understanding for the North Essex authorities. I did circulate that to all members of Council prior to the date of the meeting that we were due to have in December. And I circulated the paper on devolution prior to it being considered by the Essex leaders. That's the leaders of the County Council, the 2 unitary authorities and the 12 second-tier authorities at their meeting on the Thursday before what our council meeting was due. At that meeting, there was unanimity about taking that further forward and asking officers to come forward with a proposed bid to make to government. And all Essex leaders will be meeting on the 30th of January to consider the work that will have been done on that. I've also been able, through the good offices of the Chief Exec, to arrange for Tom Walker, who is the Executive Director at Essex County Council, who actually was the author, well, the Secretary of State was the author, but actually wrote the words in the White Paper and is leading from the County Council's perspective to have a meeting entirely for members of this authority, albeit virtually, on Monday the 23rd of January at 6 p.m. The Chief Exec will be sending out the details and the link, etc. But that will be, I think, an ideal opportunity to learn exactly the way in which Essex, and it's not Essex County Council, it's Greater Essex, is looking to move forward, and also to answer any questions that you might have on the devolution programme. So hopefully that will be something which members will find very useful. On the Memorandum of Understanding between the North Essex authorities, I think all members will agree that there are significant challenges for local government, not least around how we make use of scarce resources, etc. And we have seen the way in which the South Essex authorities have come together under the ASALA, Association of South Essex Local Authorities, although I think they're now going to call themselves the South Essex Authorities. And it was felt in North Essex, although we've been working extremely well together on a number of issues, it would be useful to put that into a more formal, on a more formal footing. And so again, that memorandum of association, memorandum of understanding rather, has gone to all authorities. I have not yet signed it. I wanted to hear the views of any members on that, but I would recommend strongly that we should play a part, and a key part, in the way in which the North Essex authorities work. I'll stop there, Chairman, before going on to the other item, just in case there are any questions.
Thank you, Councillor Button. So do any members have any questions on the devolution or levelling up? No? Okay, carry on, thank you.
Okay, if I may then, I'll proceed. I want to make a statement about the announcement that the government made on the 19th of December regarding the provisional allocations for new homes bonus for 2023-24. As members will know, this fund was created to incentivise places that recognise the urgency to help meet the increasing housing need for our communities. We have, as a council, been provisionally allocated just over £1.4 million in recognition of the strong housing growth we have facilitated in this district, including also a premium to recognise our performance in the delivery of essential affordable housing. I think as a council we can be proud of the work that we have done locally to tackle the housing issue. Since the introduction, Chairman, of the New Homes Bonus in 2011, the Council has prudently chosen not to use this funding to underpin the revenue budget, but instead this Council has used it to deliver the community infrastructure that supports this growth. The National Homes Bonus has been a major source of funding for the Council's district investment strategy, alongside supporting planning for growth and promoting economic development. Combined with other resources, the New Homes Bonus has delivered the regeneration of Braintree Town Centre, the expansion of superfast broadband across the district, the acquisition of Chapel Hill site, securing a strategic housing site, improved health facilities at the former Braintree College site, the Plaza Enterprise Centre, grow-on units and additional car parking at Springwood. It's enabled us to invest to earn opportunities such as the acquisition of 3 and 4 Century Drive, and it's provided working capital for the expanded planning enforcement team, something which I know members on all sides of the Council were keen that we should do. Future use of the New Homes Bonus includes funding towards the Millennium Slips, which levers in huge amount of additional resources on a multi-agency basis, but of course will be subject to the RIS2 bid and also to Essex County Council. It will also be used on the Maltings Lane Community Centre in Witham and also the Witham Enterprise units, subject to a satisfactory business case. But, Mr. Chairman, the last 3 years have seen our community go through some of the most difficult challenges we have faced in a generation. Whilst residents and businesses have been trying to recover from the impact of the pandemic, other global events have led to rising prices for essentials and a dramatic increase in the cost of living. This is having a significant impact on the most vulnerable and disadvantaged in our communities, and is also impacting those who may not have previously needed support or know where to go for help. As a council, we responded quickly to this emerging crisis, and we have worked with partners to help our residents and businesses. And you will see the details around some of our activity in the response to the scrutiny report, which is later on the agenda. The government has also put a number of measures in place nationally to support those most in need. But the scale of the challenge requires us to work together on a local level to help the communities we know best. So tonight I'd like to announce that we are planning in our budget proposals to allocate 1 million of our 2023-24 New Homes Bonus allocation to support the residents of the Braintree district through this cost of living crisis. This will supplement the investment we have already made through use of our existing funds and resources and through our shared prosperity fund allocation. We will use this to deliver a 3-point plan through to March 2025. First, to provide food security and access to essential goods across the district, making it easier for everyone to reach, including those living in our most rural areas. Secondly, we will help the most vulnerable by supporting community groups and organisations to do more. These groups are already doing some incredible work and are well placed to identify and support those who need most help. We're not intending to be in competition with them, we're intending to give them additional extra support. And finally, to enable physical and emotional health and well-being for anyone, especially young people, struggling to afford vital access to leisure facilities and sports clubs. We have strong partnerships with our public sector partners and community groups, and will be working with them over the coming weeks to develop the detail of our plans and maximise the resources available. We will, of course, bring these proposals back to Council following the confirmation of the proposed New Homes Bonus allocation. I hope members will agree that this is absolutely the right way to be using this funding at this time. And it would not have been possible had we not enabled the development of housing to support our growing population. The development of housing not only provides housing for those who need it, but also supports the rest of our community in very, very practical ways. The remaining 400,000, Chairman, will be set aside to ensure that we have funding in place to deliver our recently updated strategies for economic growth and healthy housing, following the consultation period currently underway and final agreement at Cabinet in March. We are not intending to salt the 400,000 away into reserves never to be seen again. We are actually going to make that work today for our district. So, Chairman, I just wanted to make that there. I hope that the whole Council will be able to support these proposals that will be coming forward. But I also wanted to give advance notice that that was what we were intending to do. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Batland. And just a reminder, questions on those items there were between items 12 and 15 later in the agenda. So we're moving swiftly on to agenda item 6, which is a motion by Councillor Tom Cunningham, supporting communities and residents. Members, this item is set out on page 6 of the agenda, and before I invite Councillor Cunningham to introduce and formally state his motion, I can confirm there are no amendments for this motion. Councillor Cunningham, please can you formally move your motion?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Formally move. And
before you make your speech on your motion, it must be seconded. Thank you, Councillor Batland. Do you reserve your right to speak? Thank you. So, members, the motion has been formally moved and seconded by Councillor Cunningham and Councillor Batland. So I now invite Councillor Cunningham to make his speech.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I don't think we can say often enough how the gratitude we express to our communities and the support they have given their residents during 3 exceptionally difficult years. Our Bouncing Back plan was an essential element of planning key work for the final half of this council administration. Coming into force in 2021, as we were starting to emerge out of the pandemic, the administration's refreshed annual plan was so much more than a programme of work. It was an overarching ambition for the district following the most difficult and unexpected of times. During this time, the administration has delivered on town centre work, supported communities, promoted healthy lifestyles, brought forward employment land, supported businesses, and continued to play a major role on a wider geographical area, unlocking the opportunities of the North Essex economy, as well as working collaboratively to ensure the best quality services can be delivered. Jobs, journeys, health and homes were the overarching themes of this administration, and with the projects delivered and being delivered, the administration continues full steam ahead, appreciating the difficulties and concerns of residents in what is likely to be a difficult year ahead. The way in which we support our fellow residents, communities and our businesses is the golden thread of public service, allied to the services we deliver that our residents rely on and value. At the start of a new year, I believe it's right that the Council reaffirms its commitment to these objectives, which I honestly believe we all share these values, even if our approach to them may sometimes differ. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Cunningham. So, do any members wish to speak on this motion? And please can I remind members that their speeches must be directed to the motion under discussion. Right, Councillor McKay. Everyone else, please keep your hands up until you're acknowledged. But if you'd like to, yes, please.
I'm delighted to support this motion. And the reason I think we're in the position that we're able to reaffirm our commitment to support our communities is because of the strong financial position that this council finds itself in. And it finds itself in that for some of the reasons that the leader spoke about, but the way we've treated New Homes Bonus, which has been used to invest in our infrastructure, not for managing the operation as some other authorities have used that same funding. So that has allowed us to actually take decisions about how we support residents through infrastructure investment. And as you've just heard, we're now proposing investment in our actual residents' well-being, and it's only able to do that because we have managed this authority for many years for prudent financial management and has created a very strong financial base to allow it the flexibility. And I'm sure there are other authorities quite close to here that don't have the same decision-making flexibility that we are able to exhibit tonight. So thank you. I support it fully.
Thank you, Councillor McKee. Councillor Abbott?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I very much agree with the motion and agree that the community BDC and many agencies and groups have weathered the COVID challenge. Though I think it's right to point out that not everyone did survive the pandemic, and many people have also been left with significant health problems, and obviously they don't have a voice. However, whilst the Council has indeed invested in projects, town centres, employment land and medical facilities, the lion's share of that has been in Braintree and Great Notley. And indeed, Councillor Butland tonight rehearsed that list again. I believe apart from broadband, it's almost extensively in Braintree and Great Notley. So if BDC is really committed to supporting communities and residents, and I'm talking here now about physical improvements, not just the welcome news tonight on the New Homes Bonus money, that by definition means the whole district. I think it's worth reminding ourselves that about half of our residents live in villages and rural areas, and the other half live in the three main towns. But those villages get a very small fraction of BDC's direct investment monies and have done for many, many years. Indeed, I think it was last financial year that, when I looked into the details, something like 90% of BDC's capital investment that year had been in Braintree and Great Notley. Also, BDC has net cash and investments totalling over £60 million. And I believe, as well as the announcement tonight, which we want to see the details of, but does sound encouraging, there is still another £1 million of unallocated New Homes Bonus money. So whatever the outcome of the May elections, and Councillor Butland was keen to talk about them earlier this evening, we believe that it is essential on this side of the room that investment policy is steered towards a much more balanced delivery, so that in terms of physical improvements, not just support for the groups, which Councillor Butland rightly mentioned earlier, our villages get much more investment, a much better share. And that includes the village Councillor Wright and I represent of Silver End, which I believe has been persistently underinvested in. Braintree Council owns two properties there in particular, one the doctor's surgery and one a local amenity. And we have been trying for years to get investment into them. The doctor's surgery is under huge pressure. When I've asked Councillor McKee about this in the past, he said, well, it's not up to us, it's up to the NHS. But BDC owns the building. And the amenity facility I asked for some money for, we were awarded, I believe we're going to be awarded in the budget £5,000. And I asked for £40,000. And when I asked as to who decided to change the nature of the councillor bid I'd made, Councillor Butland's reply was, well, it wasn't God. He may think that type of political jousting is funny, but for us in our local communities and the villages, we seriously want to see improvements. So if we are going to talk in a collegiate way about working cross-party on these things, then not just Silver End, but the other villages in this district do need a better share of the investment and a conversation with us as local ward members right across the piece as to how we can achieve that. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Abbott. Councillor Raymond.
Thank you, Chairman. I fully support this motion. It is important that the BDC introduce various programs to support the small enterprise as they play a crucial part in district's growth. Last month, last quarter, few businesses based at Braintree Town Centre who were seeking business support grants contacted me. Myself and Councillor Tom Cunningham worked together to assist an entrepreneur pass its details to the officers. Last month, I received an email from a business manager, and they showed their gratitude. Their meeting went well with the economic development team, and they are currently in progress to receive substantial funding to support their business needs. I fully support this motion. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Raymond. Councillor Beavis.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I also support tonight's motion. I'm not sure if I fully support the motion, but I kind of understand the direction of it. But I have a lot of sympathy and understanding of Councillor Abbott this evening, where he's actually talking about fair funding distribution across our district. And if you take the Headingham's ward, for example, where I've represented now for almost 20 years, we've had a Section 106 agreement in place for about 10 years now to deliver a new Headingham's Medical Centre, and also Section 106 money that would deliver vast improvements in the village as well. But the problem is, with this Section 106, that it's just not coming down the track, and it's being held up because parties can't come together and agree a way forward. And I'll give you a very good example of this. At this council planning committee, the early part of last year, yes, we have agreed to a new Headingham Medical Centre, and the first piece of turf was supposed to be dug in the spring of last year, but that hasn't happened. And I had a meeting actually with the providers of this new facility, and to my amazement, actually, the funding hasn't even been agreed yet with the Integrated Care Board. And there's no certainty that this medical centre is going to be built out. And what's further worrying is that we have a very old surgery in Castle Headingham, Falcon Square, that could well close next year when the lease comes to an end. And I jolly well hope that the NHS is prepared for this. Because quite frankly, we've been told by national NHS to use primary care or pharmacy services. Well, we just haven't got the services in the rural areas. And when I think about the Headinghams outside of the Elizabeth Coulter surgery, where currently, if you're trying to get a prescription out of the pharmacy services there, you're jolly lucky if you get seen within 6 hours if they haven't closed the door. And this is on a day-to-day, regular basis to try and get prescriptions in Halstead. And finally, I just wanted to say, I do remember a few years ago now, this council going through some sort of LGA corporate review, and I need to declare an interest as a member of the LGA. But I do remember at that time the LGA saying that there are lots of projects coming out of this council, and big projects, very big projects. But actually, what about the low-hanging fruit, the projects that have been hanging around for years that we're just not delivering? And actually, in my ward, I cannot think of a better example than the Headingham's Medical Centre. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Beavis. Councillor Ball.
Thank you, Chairman. I just wanted to really draw attention to one aspect of the way in which this council helps local residents. I mean, we've talked about things decided at cabinet level and at council level, but right down to the very lowest level, the Councillors' Community Grants is a real gem at a time when many people seem to be involved in making life more difficult for others. Every councillor in this chamber has helped in some way. In some ways, it's sometimes it's been local sports group, heritage projects, community initiatives, cost of living support, and help for young parents. This is an excellent initiative. These are just a few of the areas where grants have been given. I think this shows how this council is best placed to focus on local needs far more than big government can. And residents can rely on those that they know and trust, whether that be dedicated volunteers or whether it be their own ward councillor. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Ball. Councillor Pell.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm very concerned where it says you're supporting town centres. Now, we knew that Houston was going to be last on the list to be done to revamp Houston Town High Street. It seems to have come to a halt once again, and with an election coming, we don't know when it will happen. And I just feel that, once again, we are bottom of the heap. At Cabinet, you took away the money for our new community centre that has been set aside for it. I just feel that we are very much the poor relation. And as regards Councillor Beaver saying about the surgery and the pharmacy, I queued for 3 hours at the pharmacy and I witnessed the door being closed to people standing in the snow and ice outside. We're not surviving. You know, we need help from you. We are as important in Houston as you are in Braintree. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Pell. Councillor Thorogood.
Thank you, Chairman. And just to reiterate, there is a feeling across much of the district outside of Braintree that Braintree gets the lion's share of all the monies that come into the council. Take, for example, Fearing Community Centre's excellent capital bid at the tail end of last year, which was rejected. The Fearing Community Centre had already done a lot of work to reduce the carbon footprint of the building with grants, etc., and was looking to improve yet more because they have some very large windows which need replacing and are quite antiquated and very expensive to replace. For example, although it was a very good bid, the bid was rejected, although there were only 2 bids as well. And the reason given was that other similar bids might come forward. Now, surely that shouldn't be the reason to reject a bid, especially with one as excellent as that. And every bid should be considered on its own merits. I'd also just like to say, it was mentioned that infrastructure comes with building houses. That is not the case, unfortunately. Coggeshall Surgery, there's 300 homes are being built in Coggeshall. Coggeshall Surgery is getting no money, and there's going to be 1,000 new residents in Coggeshall with 300 houses. There is a new class coming to St Peter's Primary School in 2 years' time, I understand. But already families in Coggeshall are sending their children, if they don't, because it's done by how the crow flies. If you live on the outer rim of the village, you're already having to send your children, not having to, but you're being directed to send your children to Silver End or Great Tay because you can't get in to Coggeshall, Fearing or Kelvedon. So there isn't the infrastructure that that you say that there is. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Thorogood. Councillor Bowers.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. I'd like to fully support the motion, and I think it's very good for it to be brought before us tonight. And definitely from this side, we are very much about supporting our community, our residents, and through the pandemic, and as we come out the outside, bouncing back together. I'd also just like to make a comment in regards the comments that were made by Councillor Beavers earlier, in regards the rural areas which we also support. But making comments like low-hanging fruit and projects like that. You have to have an understanding of a lot of projects. There is a lot of hard work and there are a lot of complex to get things across the line. And the Sybil Headingham Medical Centre is one full example. And just to get an update from my portfolio on this, is our understanding that the outline business case for this project has now been approved by the Integrated Care Board, and that we are working hard, they are working hard with the One Medical Group to reach a final business case approved within the coming months. So hopefully we will be able to keep them timescales, and that's what we will all trying to achieve. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Bowers. Councillor Rose.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. Like my other colleagues here, I support this motion by Councillor Cunningham. But what I'd like to just draw attention to, Chairman, is part of the report title, Communities and Residents. I don't know if members are aware, there's a facility that's brought out by Whittingham Town Football Club called Soccerability. I don't know if anybody's heard of that. Soccerability is an initiative that they've set up is whereby they enables children who have a disability to take part in sport, because they go up and watch their siblings play football, and in the past they used to just sit on benches and watch. They now take part in that, and it's done by the football club providing FA accredited trainers from as young as 3 years old up to about 11, and they've got these various little teams. The thing is, I'd like to say to the cabinet members that if you go and have a look at there, the ground is absolutely covered in mud, and the little kids get coated up and you can't see one from another. What they really need is an all-weather pitch, as half size. Now you could say that's a cost. Well, I can't support that for my community grant, it's above that. But if you take some of the clubs like Sudbury, they have put an all-weather pitch in, and they actually lease that out, or rent that out, for about 5 or 6 days a week, and it brings in a very, very healthy revenue income. We should be looking at that and see if we can't look at something for Whittam, because I believe that these children are our future residents, and to bring them out, and it not only just teaches them football, it teaches them how to act as a team, to be less self-centred, and to integrate with others. So I would just like to ask the Cabinet member if they could look at that and maybe talk to Whittam Football Club and see how best we could help with this Communities and Residents Initiative. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Rose. Councillor Walsh.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I wasn't planning to speak, but I would like to give a particular example about lack of infrastructure when new housing is approved. And I should acknowledge or declare an interest if that's appropriate. I was a member of the Coggeshall Neighbourhood Plan Group for 6 years. When the Bovis scheme was approved on appeal, and the parish council of which I'm a member and the Neighbourhood Plan Group, supported by officers at this council, were against it, but it got approval, the Bovis scheme, for over 300 houses. I've been checking the documentation recently, including with the patient support group at our surgery. NHS England, when the application went out to consultation, said that just on the capital side alone, £113,544 should be provided. This was from NHS England before any development commences. The houses are being built, and I spoke to the senior clinician at the surgery recently, Dr. Harland. She has not seen a penny. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Walsh. Any other members? Councillor Pritchard.
Thank you, Chairman. I'll be supporting this motion. I think the key thing about this motion is it talks to what this council has the capability of delivering to its residents, and not other bodies who we either work with or are reliant upon for some of the decision-making journey. And it's also interesting that we talk about infrastructure and housing, having been through the process in the last years of declining an infrastructure-led housing recommendation or strategy. So the contradiction is just amazing. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Pritchard. Anyone? So, Councillor Buckland, as the seconder to this motion, and having reserved your right to speak, do you wish to do so now?
Yes, please, Chairman. I just want to pick up on a couple of points which have been raised by members opposite. First of all, can we just get some, and bring back perhaps some memory to members opposite who seem to think that all of the investment in the last 20 years has gone into Braintree. I'm surprised that Councillor Mrs. Pell has forgotten that she and I sat in the swimming pool at Halstead when we opened that. Was that not an investment in Halstead?
A long time ago.
And also, would she not agree that we have, for the last 10, 15 years, kept 800,000 was the people, some people in Alstead, trying to make up their mind what they wanted done with it. Has she forgotten that? Then we turn to Whittam. An all-weather pitch, I seem to recall, being opened down there. Oh, and there was a new sports centre also built there. Now, I appreciate that there was also a sports centre built in Braintree. There are some who question whether a district this size should have 3 sports centres and swimming pools. But this council took the view that to be able to provide services across the district, that was important. Then we have this, what is becoming now almost a revolving tape from the Leader of the Opposition about all of the investment has taken place in Braintree and Great Notley. Yes, it has taken place in Great Notley. Why? Because that land was designated as employment land. And if you designate somewhere as employment land, wouldn't that be where you would want to start to focus on employment? And I can assure you, through you, Chairman, that a lot of our constituents, and there are 3 of us here who represent that area, took a lot of flack from residents who didn't want to see what they considered to be green and open land taken with the development that is going on there now. But we made it clear to them it was designated employment land. And the 500 or 600 jobs that will be there won't be for the people of Great Notley. They will be for the people across the whole district and maybe from outside the district. Because we on this side recognise that we are not in little pods and no one crosses a border. But to be fair, particularly to Councillor Thorogood, because he was the only one on that side that voted against Horizon 120 and the Plaza. All his other colleagues supported it. They don't want to be reminded now that they supported it, but they did. But to be fair, Councillor Thorogood actually, because it was a recorded vote, voted against it. And he's nodding, he agrees. I don't know about his guy on his right-hand side, his leader, but I agree. Chairman, I think I have the right to speak, do I, or shall I just wait?
Yes, you do.
Okay, thank you. So I'm grateful to Councillor Thorogood for his memory of that. Now, the issue about the health service and GP surgeries, we do not provide health services. That's a fairly simple statement to understand. What we have done as an authority, and I'm proud of, where we have been able to work with our health partners and where we have been able to facilitate, either by directly investing or by helping on planning issues, etc., we have worked to do that. But there is not the slightest point in us saying we will build a surgery in XYZ if the NHS do not want one there and are not prepared to be able to man it. Not man it? Staff it. In that, it's not buildings that provide services, it's the professional expertise that does so. So we don't provide that. If one is unhappy, then like us, one will need to take it up with the local health service and the National Health Service on that. It is not for us to be able to do it, much though we would like. If we want to argue collectively that the NHS should be delegated to local decision-making and locally democratically elected decision-making, I will be there at the front of the queue with you. But that's not what you've put forward yet. You would rather just sit the other side and lob little hand grenades. So I just wanted to clear those 1 or 2 little differences that we have between this side of the chamber and that side.
Thank you. Councillor Abraham.
Please.
Yeah, point of order. Please state the item number.
So you could ask the member to withdraw that previous comment that he made, please. Thank you, Chairman. Apologies, Councillor Ritchie, I didn't quite hear. Which councillor?
The councillor who spoke about our newest councillor, sorry, I don't know his name, sorry. Councillor Abraham, if you could just withdraw his last comment, please, directed towards the leader, thank you.
Councillor Ritchie, just in terms of points of order, it's in relation to just a statement that they have made. I'm sure Councillor Abraham will consider his behaviour in this chamber going forward. He's a new member, and we'll have a discussion with him in terms of procedure going forward. But if we could proceed, I'd be grateful.
Right. Let's move on to Councillor Cunningham as the proposer of the motion.
Mr. Chairman, sorry, apologies.
You may reply to the speeches, but can I remind you that you should confine your reply to previous speakers only and should not introduce any new matters. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, thank you very much. I'm conscious of the length of the agenda this evening and a very, very good discussion. First of all, I'd like to take the positives out of our discussion and thank Councillor Abbott for the first half of his speech, and obviously matters relating to sort of picking one community, pitching them against the other, have been dealt with. I note his party did not complain about investment in Braintree in their literature in the Braintree South by-election, but I appreciate our political game is our political game sometimes. I'd like to thank colleagues from our own side, particularly Councillor Rose, Councillor Raymond, Councillor Pritchard, Councillor McKee, Councillor Bohr for their positive contributions to the discussion, and particularly in relation to Councillor Raymond's comments. We know our economic team do a very good job of supporting business. It's always extremely grateful, and I know the excellent team of officers really appreciate that first-hand feedback. Thank you. And underpinning all of this was Councillor McKee's point. You can have ambition for your communities, you can have ambition for your residents, but you have to have the money to deliver. And I think, Mr. Chairman, sometimes when a council like this has achieved so much over the last 2 decades, well beyond its remit of a second-tier district authority, sometimes the expectation becomes set very high. That's not a bad thing, but also that has to be balanced with the realisation of what is it within the council's purview and direct control. And I think Councillor Pritchard articulated that perfectly. And I know if Councillor Tattersley was here this evening, and wish him a speedy recovery, he would be extremely irritated at this constant suggestion that somehow Braintree District Council can engineer general GPs into surgeries when when this council has done an excellent job and has an excellent record of facilitating new health facilities across this district. In respect to Councillor Beavis's comments, and I appreciate her general thrust about investments and her work with the LGA, I think my understanding is when the LGA peer review took place, and I believe it was 2013, maybe 2014. I remember it certainly under Nicola Beech's chief executive ship. My understanding, and I wasn't particularly close to it at the time, but the direction of travel was to continue to invest in projects that lever in that great social, economic, community benefit to residents, whilst delivering substantial financial returns to ensure frontline services. Mr. Chairman, I think this administration and this council has an exemplary record in that, certainly far better than comparable authorities. And whilst I don't sit on the LGA, or I do have contacts in the LGA, and many of us speak with council colleagues right across the country in local government, as does Councillor Mrs Beavis, and they acknowledge Braintree District Council as being one of the very best in that, bearing in mind its size. We thank Councillor Walsh for his usual intervention. On this occasion, I think it was mild-mannered, hasn't always been the case, but I do have to repeat the point. We do remember Councillor Walsh in 2018 October meeting there with his gag poster, fighting against the garden communities, and him and sort of cohorts. And yes, granted, it got him to this council, Mr. Chairman, and obviously the decision went a certain way. But we have to appreciate the legacy issues of that decision. Those who wanted good quality infrastructure to support development have been let down by that decision. And obviously, I think maybe history will judge that in the decades to come. So, forgive me, in wanting to be mild-mannered, I think his points were a little opportunistic on this occasion. But, Mr. Chairman, thank you very much. An excellent debate. And I'm delighted with the tacit support of many and actual support of most. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Cunningham and members. So the motion set out on page 6 of the agenda has been moved and seconded. All those in favour, please indicate. All those against, please indicate. An abstention. Thank you, members. That motion has been approved. So I now proceed to item number 7, the motion by Councillor Mrs. Joanne Beavis, the cost of living crisis. Members, following the publication of the report set out on pages 7 to 8 on the agenda, an amendment to the published motion was received in accordance with the Council procedure rules. Councillor Mrs. Beavis and Councillor Abbott, as the proposer and seconder of the original motion, were consulted, and Councillor Beavis has confirmed agreement to the amendment. As a consequence of this acceptance, the amended motion becomes the substantive motion, which will be considered this evening. So, members, please can I remind you that an addendum report setting out the amended motion was published and circulated to all members on Friday the 9th of December, if you're hunting through Councillor Siri, and we will be referring to the addendum report for this debate. Councillor Mrs. Beavis, please can you formally move your motion, and can I remind you that before you make your speech on your motion, it must be seconded.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I formally move the motion as amended to become the substantive motion. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Mrs. Beavis. And Councillor Abbott, you are recorded as the seconder of this motion. Please confirm that you second this motion. Do you wish to speak after Councillor Mrs. Beavis' speech or reserve your right?
I formally second and reserve the right. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Abbott. So, members, the motion has been formally moved and seconded by Councillor Mrs. Beavis and Councillor Abbott. I will now invite Councillor Mrs. Beavis to make her speech.
Thank you, Chairman. And the motion follows my original motion on the cost of living crisis last summer and provides an opportunity to remind Council, our residents and communities of the progress so far, which includes protecting the most vulnerable, supporting the warm rooms, which I understand actually are sort of doing really well in our district and being supported by the voluntary sector, and working with the voluntary sector per se as well. But what I will say is I hope that Council really remembers both of these motions and the work that's gone in when it comes to setting the 23-24 budget, as an opportunity does exist to keep our council tax low, something that I've supported in this chamber over many years. We also have an opportunity to stop the cuts to our town and parish councils, and if we do decide to go ahead with the cuts, then there will be an increase in tax in any case to those double taxpayers in the district outside of Braintree, where there is no town or parish council. So that still makes me quite nervous about the local taxation of our district. And as the Cabinet Member for Finance said, and let's remind ourselves that this council is in a very strong financial position in terms of our balances and our assets, of which many local authorities in Essex simply don't have that asset base that we have. I also support this evening the news from the leader in terms of the extra 1 million new homes bonus. I've already had a bit of an update on that before council begun, and I understand the idea is to put some of that back into the revenue account to support the cost of living crisis, but I'll really need to go back and look at the detail of that. But I think that's another real positive coming forward from the council in terms of the cost of living crisis. So I'm going to leave it there, Chairman. Thank you very much. I look forward to hearing from other members, and I will come back and just make a few comments, hopefully at the end. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Mrs. Beavis. Do any members wish to speak on this motion? If so, once again, indicate, and Mayor will acknowledge. And meanwhile, Councillor McKee, as you were first, you can kick off. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. I have no hesitation in supporting the motion as proposed following Councillor Beavis and Councillor Abbott's acceptance of the amendment to the original motion. I believe it's clear from the item later in the agenda this evening, read the cost of living crisis, that the Council is taking the rising cost of living as a serious situation for all residents across all areas of the district living in our urban towns, key villages and rural parishes. across all income levels. However, not all residents are affected in the same way. For some, the rising energy costs and food pricing, coupled with the inflationary effects of wage demands from the union demands, is causing serious reduction in living standards and for the just about managing residents to fall into debt and despair. Those are the people we as a council must focus our attention on first and help with the safety net as they fall off the high wire. I'm pleased that Councillor Mrs Beavis and Councillor Abbott have accepted the amended motion that removed the 2 points that sought to tie the hands of this and future administrations when setting a balanced budget. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor McKee. Councillor Ritchie.
Thank you, Mr Chairman. I won't go into too much detail around what's on agenda item number 12. Once I get to that point, you will see that we as a council have responded remarkably well to the scrutiny report around the cost of living, as I'm sure Councillor Beavis has seen in the agenda this evening. We have a great track record of working with our community and voluntary services when we are assisting those within our communities who are of the most need, and as such I'll be supporting this motion this evening. Thank you, Mr Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Ritchie. Any other members wishing to speak? No. Then Councillor Abbott, as you seconded the motion, reserving the right to speak and have not yet spoken in the debate, would you like to speak now?
Yes, thank you, Mr Chairman. Yes, we were happy to accept the amendment, although I think the point about the budget really is crucial, ensuring that the 23-24 budget considers impacts on all residents. Now, the news tonight from the leader is welcome, though obviously we want to see more details on that. But I think the budget is going to be very, very important. As I understand it, currently there is still a proposal in it to increase council tax by 2%. That's going to be a further burden on residents. And I think we have to recognise that the cost of living crisis is going to last through all of this year, probably well into next year, maybe beyond, until inflation is brought under control and hopefully living standards start to stabilise again. So I would just briefly, Chairman, emphasise that point. Is we have to do all the things Councillor Butland said, but also have to consider very carefully what the impact of this budget is going to be on our residents. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Abbott. So I'd like to invite Councillor Mrs Beavis as the proposer of the motion to close the debate. And please can I remind you that you should confine your reply to previous speeches and you should not introduce any new matters. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. I will keep my comments very brief. But what I will say is, you know, since the summer, I think the strength in this council's work around the cost of living crisis has been that we've done it cross-party and we've done it together. And there aren't any political wins in this. You know, people are severely struggling, and I think we as a council are incumbent to do everything that we can. And I really do think that the 23-24 budget is another opportunity for us to really, you know, support the taxpayers and the residents of our district. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Mrs Beavis. I'll now put the motion to the vote. So, members, as the motion is set out in the addendum report has been moved and seconded, all those in favour, please indicate. Thank you, members. That is unanimous and the motion is approved. We'll now proceed to agenda item number 8, the motion by Councillor James Abbott, Housing Land Supply. Members, this item is set out on pages 9 to 10 of the agenda, and this item is set out on pages 7. Apologies, I think it's just 9 and 10 on the agenda. Yeah, thank you. And I invite Councillor Abbott to please formally move your motion. And can I remind you that before you make your speech, then on your motion it must be seconded.
So moved.
Thank you, Councillor Abbott. Councillor Thorogood, you are recorded as the seconder of this motion. Please confirm that you second this motion, and do you wish to speak after Councillor Abbott's speech or reserve your right?
Yes, I'd like to second this motion and reserve my right to speak.
Thank you, Councillor Thorogood. Members, before I ask Councillor Abbott to formally state his motion and then open this for debate, I must advise that there is an amendment which we first need to deal with this evening. The amendment has been submitted by Councillor Mrs Spray, and the supplementary report was circulated to members on the 9th of December 2022. Please can I remind members that they may only speak once on the amendment, and speeches should be confined to the matter under discussion and should last no longer than 5 minutes. I will exercise my discretion to allow longer speeches if the point is particularly complex or detailed. Councillor Mrs Spray, please can you introduce and state the precise wording of your proposed amendment?
Thank you, Chairman. I'm pleased to present the amendment to this motion as set out on the agenda paper. I was going to assume that members had read it and therefore was not intending to read it in full myself. And if that is acceptable, then I'm pleased to move the amendment. Thank you.
Yes, that's acceptable. Thank you, Mrs Ray. Does this proposed amendment find a seconder? Thank you, Councillor Butland. Do you wish to reserve your right to speak? Do any members wish to speak on this amendment? Councillor Walsh.
Thank you, Mr Chairman. I'm speaking...
Point of order, Chairman. Surely the amendment has to be moved first, doesn't it?
The amendment has been moved by Councillor Spray.
Have you seconded it?
Yes, but she wants to make a speech about it. It's her amendment.
Sorry, Councillor Spray, I think there was a confusion. I think the Chairman believed that was your speech. If you have got a speech, then please do so.
No, thank you. Thank you, Chairman. Yes, I would like to say a bit more. Thank you very much. Thank you. Chairman, I welcome the first 3 paragraphs of Councillor Abbott's motion, which set out this Council's position very clearly on our housing land supply. I am a bit surprised, however, that he didn't accept the amended motion, because I think things have moved on very positively quite recently. Nevertheless, we found ourselves not having a 5-year supply, despite being on the front foot in this local authority in delivering a record number of homes. The problem largely lies with developers not building when they have permission to do so. And under current planning law, as many members will be aware, a local authority cannot force a developer to start construction. And this, essentially, is largely why we fell short of our target in this current year. Subsequently, we have had announcements from the Secretary of State, Michael Gove, proposing planning reforms which would radically alter this situation. More details have emerged with the consultation document, and this was published just before Christmas. It was sent to me by one of our lead officers and actually formed some of my slightly less lighter reading over Christmas, but nonetheless very interesting. And there are several proposals this administration especially welcomes. I'm just going to point out 3 of them. That housing targets not being the be-all and end-all, with local circumstances being taken into account, building the right homes in the right places with the right infrastructure, something that I and colleagues, together with planning officers, I might add, are always striving for, and developers who don't build being penalised and not being allowed to continue submitting more applications when they haven't progressed existing permitted sites. Chairman, I welcome these proposals, and I personally want to raise a cheer for a Secretary of State who not only talks about planning reforms, but is actually bringing them forward. I strongly support the intention of this Council to write to the Secretary of State commending him in these terms. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Mrs Spray. Apologies for the confusion, because I have down the precise wording of your proposed amendment without working it into the speech. Okay, so if we just ask for speakers again, just to make sure that we're... So, Councillor Walsh, you were going to start off.
Thank you very much. And I appreciate the comments by the Cabinet Member for planning. And I'm asking as a former member of the Royal Town Planning Institute for nearly 30 years, so I'm not unsympathetic to the process. I mean, and I'm just genuinely not quite clear. And I understand what you just said, Councillor Spray, but how often do our planning officer colleagues monitor and report to the local plan committee and the planning committee the actual position on the 5-year housing land supply? And would I be right? Perhaps I'm not. Would I be right in thinking that senior officers and possibly yourself were somewhat surprised that it has gone slightly below the 5-year supply? And in relation to this, does this not in fact limit our ability to decline planning permissions on unallocated sites or inappropriate housing developments? And does it not finally reduce the credibility of our non-garden community local plan, the Section 2 local plan? And this comment is more towards Councillor Cunningham. I think he may have forgotten that twice an independent inspector found the proposals unsound, and that inspector, of course, has no right of reply. But my point here is that the fact that we've gone below a 5-year housing supply, does this not affect our ability to maintain the plan that we all voted for, which lasts until 2033? Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Walsh. Councillor Abbott.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The Cabinet Member asked, in effect, about why we hadn't, or why I, as a mover of the motion, hadn't accepted the amendment, and said she was surprised at that. I was expecting an amendment because, obviously, when we wrote this motion, it was before the debate in Parliament. So there's a timing issue there. Had it been afterwards, it would have looked a different motion. It's as simple as that. However, the reason we didn't accept the amendment is it's just so gushingly commending of the government. We're in the situation we are in because of a backbench rebellion. The Conservative MPs rebelled against the government and wouldn't accept the bill as it was, forcing the Secretary of State to make the changes he made. And the further reason why we didn't accept the amendment is because at the moment these are proposals out to consultation. So had she come in with a more balanced amendment that sort of took all of those into account, yes, we would have happily have accepted it, but we can't accept this one because of its tone, which is basically to say everything's fine, the government's doing a great job, which is clearly not the case. I mean, the government's planning policy over recent years has been a shambles. There's no other way of saying it. And it's not just this authority that's been caught up on the hook of the housing land supply situation, it's many others which directly led to the rebellion of backbench MPs who said enough is enough. And as Councillor Walsh has said, you know, we're in a position where we only adopted our new local plan after years and years of democratic consideration, only to find that some of the policies in it are classed as out of date because they're set against this pivot of the 5-year housing supply. You know, you're 0.1 of a year over, everything's fine and dandy, you're 0.1 of a year under and you're in trouble. It's ridiculous. It's a mess. So if they're going to sort it out, fine. But that's yet to be seen. I did want to just briefly, though, pick up on two points in her amendment, where she says the Secretary of State is going to, quote, ensure the environment is protected and give local people a greater say on where and when not to place new development. Well, haven't we heard all that before? Successive governments have been saying that since the planning system was invented, and it hasn't happened. Local people's ability to have a real say on where development goes and its nature is very limited, and under this government's become far more limited. And as for protecting the environment, I mean, pull the other one. You know, as she knows, I've been documenting the destruction of hedges and trees and greenfield sites across this district for years. If this new Secretary of State is going to bring about a change, then great, but forgive my concern that that might not be quite what is being laid out here. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Abbott. Councillor Thorogood.
Yeah, I wasn't sure if is this the last chance for me to speak?
No.
It's not.
This is on the amendment.
This is whether the amendment is to be accepted as the substantive motion or not.
I'll come in later then, thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Beavis then.
Thank you, Chairman. I'll quickly come in now because my comments chime with some of the comments previously made by colleagues. And I just wanted to bring up the village, the rural village, actually one of our most rural villages, of Grinster Green and Housestead Rural, where this council has allowed 1,000 properties to be built on a greenfield site, which wasn't allocated. And for at least 300 of those, we weren't able to defend our decision at an appeal. And I would just like to say to Council that these houses are not in the right place and they haven't got the right infrastructure. They're not sorting out the potholes of Housestead. They're not sorting out the congestion of Housestead and the rural areas to try and get to the jobs in Braintree. And I will just very briefly mention the NHS again, which, you know, I do understand the NHS myself, and I understand it from a local government perspective as well. But surely we care. Surely we care about what's going on in this district. And it's completely unacceptable for residents to stand for 4 hours, and in my case, actually 4 hours 4 times, to get turned down when I've got my mother sitting in A&E and I can't get her prescription in the ice and the snow. And, you know, I really think we get to the point now where the Cabinet Member for Health for this authority should be writing, actually, and painting the picture of what the infrastructure of this district looks like, particularly if you live outside of Braintree. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Beavis. Councillor Pritchard.
Thank you, Chair. Speaking specifically to the amendment to this motion, which I think is what we're meant to be doing, I will be supporting this amendment. Yes, it comes in the light of the changes that were brought forward by the Secretary of State. But I don't understand why in this country we can't sometimes say something positive about the incumbent government. Yes, there have been issues. I'm not going to deny it. But what we are looking at here is a positive step forward on planning regulation. And it's hardly gushing. All we've done is use the word welcome. I don't see how any of that could be described as gushing, nor do we think this is the end of it. This is the beginning of a very long process, but the amendment seems proper and right to me. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Pritchard. Any other members wish to speak on the amendment? No. So Councillor Butland, as the seconder to the amendment, and having reserved your right to speak, do you wish to do so now?
No, Chairman, I don't think there's been anything raised which needs response.
Thank you, Councillor Butland. And as the proposer of the amendment, Councillor Mrs Spray, would you like to reply to the speeches? And if I can remind you that you should confine your reply to previous speakers and not introduce any new matters.
Thank you, Chairman. With regards to Councillor Abbott's comment, I accept his comment about the timing of the amendment. That's perfectly okay. I absolutely support Councillor Pritchard's comment. This is not a gushing response. It's a recognition. We've had a number of Secretary of States over the last few years. I've actually written letters to several of them. What I'm particularly pleased about is we have a Secretary of State in post now who is doing something positive. And we look forward to we were making obviously our own response to the consultation. We look forward to seeing what others do, but this is a really positive step forward, and the most positive that I can remember for several years. Just briefly, Councillor Walsh, the 5-year supply is calculated once a year at the end of the council year. This year, officers took a lot of time over doing it, the frustration being that a number of quite large sites which had been granted permission were not coming forward, and you have to give evidence to an inspector that they are being built out before you can include them in your supply. And unfortunately, that's why we fell short, because we can't compel them to come forward and start developing and give a timescale. So that was the frustration there. You get speculative applications coming in regardless of whether you or not you have an adopted local plan, and the planning committee deals with those appropriately. I don't think, Chairman, Let me just check that I have any other comments to make. I think the paper, as it's proposed, the consultation paper, is a very good document, well worth reading, and I look forward to the end result when I hope that many of these proposals, which are some of the things we've been asking for as this planning authority for quite a long time, I look forward to those actually happening. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor. Mrs. Spray. Members, the amendment as set out in the supplementary report has been moved and seconded. All those in favour, please indicate. Any against? And abstentions. Thank you, members. The amendment has been approved and therefore becomes the substantive motion this evening. So we now, having now dealt with the amendment, I'd like to confirm for members the substantive motion before you. This is the motion as amended and set out in the supplementary report. I would like to invite Councillor Abbott as the mover of the substantive motion to make your speech.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I won't repeat everything that's been said during the amendment debate because I think that's covered quite a lot of territory. But just to emphasise that whilst we hear what the administration is saying, there's water to go under the bridge yet, and we've heard lots of promises before about planning reform in favour of communities and local authorities, which has not actually happened. The current situation, and the reason why the motion was proposed in the first place, just briefly going through the first three paragraphs which have survived, is that very recently this authority took the decision not to defend three major planning appeals. That despite the democratic decision of the Council's Planning Committee. Whilst procedurally that may well have been the right thing to do and legal advice was taken and I was privy to that legal advice and I can understand from the outside perspective, from what residents think, who were hoping that the decision the committees had made were going to hold. Some were shocked by what transpired. Obviously, we don't know the decisions yet on any of those three appeals, but it is extremely concerning that we were left in that position. If they're granted, this will add another 700 houses, roughly, a bit more than that, to the local plan. We also have a number of major sites still in the pipeline, which are also on unallocated sites. The local plan itself, now adopted, has over 15,000 houses in it, and as the administration has agreed, as per my second paragraph, that over-provides. We've already gone above and beyond what the government asked us to do. So the idea from the Conservatives that we're somehow stifling development is complete nonsense. If all of these sites come forward on top of that, I don't know where we'll be, 16,000, 17,000, way over what we were required to do. And of course, that's before we mention the two vast new towns that the Conservatives wanted to build, which was a planning disaster for many villages because that period during which they were pursuing that led to huge delays in getting the local plan, and those delays were exploited by developers. So we're not ever going to let the Conservatives get away with pretending everything's fine and dandy when it hasn't been. The situation with housing land supply, obviously we all hope it is sorted out. It is ridiculous to have this sort of Damocles hanging over that pivot point for 5 years. That has to be sorted out. It's completely unfair. And I think in the motion, we have recognised that this authority has delivered historically high numbers of houses. So that's 2,811 in the last 3 years, and a further 2,636 under construction. Again, that's not anti-development. That's a very high rate of development, and in fact, way higher than has been achieved, I think, in probably more than 1 or 2 other years in the entire history of this authority. So, yes, we do hope that things improve, but I think we wait to see whether that actually happens. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Abbott. Councillor Thorogood, you previously indicated that you wish to reserve your right to speak. Is that still the case following the adoption of the amendment? Yes, please. Thank you. So do any members wish to speak on the substantive motion? And please can I remind members that their speeches must be directed to the substantive motion as amended under discussion and be necessary for the progression of the debate. Councillor Parker.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. I would like to pick up the points made by Councillor Pritchard. I think we should be very positive about the changes that are being proposed by the Secretary of State. I've been looking at them today, and they include a significant reform to the 5-year housing land supply, which is what is really affecting us. It's particularly for councils that have an up-to-date local plan, and this council does have an up-to-date local plan. So I think there really are reasons to be hopeful. We have found ourselves in a difficult position, but I think this is going to be changing, and I think it's going to be changing very soon, and it's something that I very much welcome. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Parker. Any other members? No. Then, Councillor Thorogood, you, as you seconded this motion, reserving your right to speak and have not yet spoken, please can I invite you to speak now?
Okay, thank you, Chair. I don't intend to speak for very long. Unfortunately, the government review of housing supply will come too late for the appeals, which have been already mentioned. The Kelvedon one for 300 homes starts next week. As Councillor Parker just said, all of us here, we all voted unanimously for the local plan. We all voted unanimously for the Kelvedon neighbourhood plan. But the 300 homes is not in that neighbourhood plan or the local plan. But unfortunately, despite the planning committee going against officer advice and rejecting the application, the officers have decided not to defend it, possibly because of the 5-year housing supply, but also because of professional reasons, because they wanted it to be approved. So my concern now, especially as I'm a member of a substitute of the planning committee, is, what is the point of voting against officers' recommendation? I mean, that is a real fear for me. So that is what I just want to say. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Thorogood. Councillor Abbott, as the proposer of the substantive motion, you may reply to the speeches, and can I remind you to confine your reply to previous speakers and not introduce any new matters. Thank you.
Nothing further to add. Thank you, Chairman.
That makes it easy. Thank you, Councillor Abbott. So the substantive motion set out in the supplementary report has been moved and seconded. All those in favour, please indicate. All those against? And any abstentions? Thank you, members. The substantive motion has been approved. So we'll now proceed to agenda item 9, and thank you to the members of the public seating for your patience as we get to the approval of the Fearing Neighbourhood Plan. Members, this item is set out on pages 11 to 172 of the agenda. Please can I invite Councillor Mrs Spray, Cabinet Member for Planning and Infrastructure, to introduce the report and move the recommendations. And please can I remind you that before you make your speech, your recommendations must be seconded.
Thank you, Chairman. I'm very pleased to present this item on the Fearing Neighbourhood Plan and to move the recommendation as set out in the agenda. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Mrs Spray. So Councillor Mrs Spray has moved the recommendations as set out on page 11 of the agenda. Please can we have a seconder? Councillor Courtauld, thank you. Do you wish to reserve your right to speak?
Yes, please.
Thank you. So I'll now invite Councillor Mrs Spray to speak on this item.
Thank you, Chairman. As I say, I'm very pleased to be presenting this neighbourhood plan to you this evening for approval. This will be the 7th neighbourhood plan to be adopted, if it is, this evening. There are another 9 underway. And as I usually do when talking about neighbourhood plans, I want to start with a very big thank you and congratulations to the dedicated steering group who produced this plan. As those currently in the process of developing their plans are no doubt discovering, this is a very time-consuming exercise. It requires dedication and, dare I say it, stamina and staying power. There is a lot of work involved, and it usually comes down to a smallish group of people who volunteer to carry out the work and do so with great dedication. The end product we have before us tonight is a very fine document which demonstrates the charms of Fearing, and residents should be very proud of their village. It was back in March 2015 that the Parish Council submitted a request to BDC for the parish to be designated as a neighbourhood area, and once this was confirmed, the various consultations and plan processes began. An independent examiner, Tony Burton, was appointed to review if the neighbourhood plan met the basic conditions required in legislation and whether it should proceed to referendum. The examiner made a number of suggested amendments, which is quite usual, and these amendments mostly concern changes to wording and some revisions in order that the plan met with the national planning policies and Braintree local plan policies. Overall, the examiner was very complimentary about the plan, describing it as having a clear and consistent format. The referendum was held on the 3rd of March this year. The question asked was, do you want Braintree District Council to use the neighbourhood plan for Fearing to help it to decide planning applications in the neighbourhood area? The total number of votes cast was 437, with 414 saying yes and 23 saying no. A resounding vote in favour. Therefore, members, I turn to the recommendation set out on page 11 of your agenda, which is that the decision statement attached at Appendix 1 is approved and the Fearing Neighbourhood Plan Appendix 2 is made under Section 38A4 of the 2004 Act. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Mrs Spray. Do any members wish to speak on this item? If so, please indicate raising your hand, and we'll start with Councillor Thorogood and anybody else. That's the eye of Mrs Mayo, thank you.
I don't wish to speak for long. I just want to reiterate what Councillor Spray said, and also what Parish Councillor Blackburn said earlier as well. The process started in 2015, seven long years, including during COVID. The team has worked very hard to get it, without wishing to guess the outcome later, worked very hard to get the neighbourhood plan to here tonight. So I wish to congratulate them on all their hard work. There will be a lot of, and on the resounding 95% referendum support from the referendum. I would just like to say also there are huge pressures coming Fearing's way. It has been designated a strategic growth area. Already 165 homes are currently being built, some are already occupied. And there will be more coming down the line, another roughly 835 homes, which will double the size of Fearing. So it is a massive undertaking of pressures. Plus also the A12 widening will also have a huge impact on the village, not only during the works, but possibly, who knows what that might entail in the future. But with this neighbourhood plan, it should help with plan development and help to avoid future speculative development. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Thorogood. Any other members wish to speak? No? Well, Councillor Court orders you seconded the recommendations reserving your right to speak and have not spoken yet. Would you like to speak now?
Thank you, Chairman. Yes, please. I would just like to second Councillor Mrs Spray. I read this neighbourhood plan with great interest, especially being able to compare it to the Earl's Cone effort, which is in my ward. I'm staggered how much work has to go into these things, but it was clearly a very carefully structured and well-researched effort. I am absolutely convinced it makes a huge difference to the communities involved as far as they are trying to influence what happens to them on the planning front. And all of us members receive the majority of our interaction, I think, with our constituents on planning issues. And I would urge any communities thinking about launching an effort to complete a neighbourhood plan to do so, and to look at this one as a great example. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Courtauld. Councillor Mrs. Spray, as the proposer of the recommendation, would you like to reply to the speeches before I put the recommendations to the vote?
Only to say, Chairman, that I very much appreciate the comments of support for this neighbourhood plan. They do make a difference, and I strongly echo Councillor Courtauld's comments that, you know, any communities thinking of doing it, it is quite daunting. There is a lot of work involved, and it does take a long time, but it's well worth the effort. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Mrs. Spray. Well, thank you, members. The recommendation as set out on page 11 of the agenda have been moved and seconded. All those in favour, please indicate. That is unanimous, and the recommendations are approved. So well done, Fearing. Thank you, members. We'll now deal with item 10, Treasury Management Mid-Year Report for 2022-23. Members, this item is set out on pages 173 to 181 of the agenda. Please can I invite Councillor John McKee, Cabinet Member for Finance and Corporate Transformation, to introduce the report and move the recommendations. Please can I remind you that before you make your speech, your recommendation is seconded.
Thank you, Chairman. I'd formally move the recommendation on page 173, item 2.1.
Thank you. And can we have a seconder? Thank you, Councillor Brook. And you reserve your right. That makes it easy. Thank you. So, Councillor McKee, if you'd like to speak on this item.
Thank you, Chairman. The Council adopted the Code of Practice for Treasury Management in Public Services published by the Chartered Institute of Public Finance and Accountancy, known as CIPFA, which requires the Council to receive at least one mid-year report on its Treasury Management activities. The Treasury Management Strategy for 2022-23 was approved by full Council at its meeting held on 21st of February 22. The mid-year report was considered by the Governance and Audit Scrutiny Committee on the 3rd of November 2022, which recommended its submission to full Council. The recommendations set out in this report will help the Council demonstrate that it is achieving its corporate objectives of being a high-performing organisation that delivers excellent value for money services and is delivering better outcomes to residents and businesses and reducing costs to taxpayers. Details how the Treasury Management activities contribute towards those objectives are set out in the report attached on pages 175 to 181. I won't read them because you've all got them before you, so I'll make the recommendation to receive and note the Treasury Management Mid-Year Report for 22-23. I so move.
Thank you, Councillor McKee. Do any members wish to speak on this item? So please indicate. Councillor Abbott.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just to congratulate the author of the report and the Cabinet Member for their excellent appraisal of the disastrous Liz Truss budget.
Any other members wish to speak? No?
I'll say thank you.
Okay, I won't bother asking you to. Thank you, members. This report is for noting, so please can members indicate by a show of hands. Thank you, members. That report has been noted. We'll now move on to agenda item number 11, Towerlands Park Development Update. Members, this item is set out on pages 182 to 191 of the agenda. Please can I invite Councillor Mrs. Spray, Cabinet Member Planning and Infrastructure to introduce the report and move the recommendations. And again, I'll remind you that before you make your speech, your recommendations must be seconded.
Thank you very much, Chairman. The recommendations are set out on page 182 of tonight's agenda. I am actually going to read both of them because this is a slightly unusual report. So the first one is to delegate authority to the Corporate Director of Growth to issue a requisition for information under Section 5A of the Acquisition of Land Act 1981 in respect of the site, and that the Council's constitution is updated accordingly. And the second, the Council agrees as a matter of principle to use its compulsory purchase powers pursuant to Section 2261A of the Town and Country Planning Act 1990 to make a compulsory purchase order, the potential CPO, in respect of the land shown on the plan attached as Appendix 2, following consideration of a further full and detailed report at a future meeting of full Council if the freehold owners cannot be identified and all other avenues have been exhausted. I so move, Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Mrs Spray. And can I have a seconder?
Sorry.
Thank you, Councillor Butland. And do you reserve your right? So thank you. I will now ask Councillor Mrs Spray to speak on this matter.
Thank you, Chairman. Members, I think this is possibly one of the more unusual reports that I have brought to Council. I am going to assume that members have read the paper, which is actually quite an interesting read, so I'm just going to give a fairly brief high-level summary. I'm sure, Chairman, that members will be familiar with this site, which was until 2021 used as a golf course and equestrian and conference centre. Planning permission was granted in April 2021 to develop the site for housing with associated infrastructure. The first phase of the site development is under construction by Dandara Eastern Limited. At the time of the planning permission, the application acknowledged that not all owners of the land within the site had been identified. In particular, it has not been possible to identify the freehold owner of the piece of land which is the subject of this paper tonight. The land has not been registered at HM Land Registry, and the freehold owner is currently unknown. As things stand, construction of the potential dwellings on this land, around 66 houses, cannot commence because the developer, Repairbrook Limited, only own the leasehold and not the freehold. So this leaves an important, centrally located part of the site at risk of not being able to be developed. Repairbrook has made significant efforts through their own solicitors to try and find who owns the freehold without success. Their investigations went back as far as 1555. Details are outlined on page 184 of the agenda. Repairbrook are therefore turning to this council for assistance in identifying the freehold owner of the site. So, Chairman, the purpose of this paper is to give delegated authority to the Corporate Director for Growth to issue a requisition for information under the Acquisition of Land 1981 Act. Currently, the power to exercise this function is not contained within the Council's constitution, and subject to approval this evening, the constitution will be updated accordingly. Repairbrook Limited have agreed to meet the Council's reasonable costs of issuing the required requisitions. Finally, should this investigation not flush out the freehold owner, it will be necessary to go down the compulsory purchase order route. Needless to say, this will be more time-consuming, more expensive and more complicated. Details are within the agenda report, principally on page 185. Now, if this does turn out to be the case, it will be necessary to come back to Council to consider formally making the CPO, compulsory purchase order. We hope that won't be necessary. The recommendations are set out on page 182, as I've just detailed. There are two, and that's the end of my report. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Mrs Spray. Do any members wish to speak? Councillor Mann?
This is indeed, Chairman, an unusual proposal. I can't remember one like it since
I've been a councillor, which is quite a long time now. I do find it strange, and I wonder why a distinguished charitable foundation appears reluctant to engage and provide answers to a legitimate request for information, which is the heart of the problem as I see it. As it stands at the moment, I support two recommendations. This is one of our local plan growth locations that is in fact being built out. And it would be very strange to have a 66 house hole in the middle of development. It's like a missing piece from the jigsaw. It would be a complete nonsense. So I think you can make a strong case that it is in the public interest that we pursue this for current and for future residents of this place. And I think the measures that are outlined here are measured and proportionate. I would make one proviso that I would hope that any costs can be recovered, whatever they are, from the developer. But I recognise that that's a discussion for another occasion. Thanks, Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Mann. Councillor Pritchard.
Thank you, Chairman. Actually, I was going to ask a similar question to the one that Councillor Mann just posed around costs relating to any potential future compulsory purchase order. That might be my naivety and not understanding how costs are attributed, but I wouldn't like to think that the Council is left with that burden. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Pritchard. Councillor Abbott.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just two brief points. But firstly, in saying I agree this is the right thing to do. But my first point is just to note in public that the council is prepared sometimes to intervene on sites to potentially enter into a compulsory purchase to make sure an allocated site is developed. There may be other instances where that might be possible. But my second point is there's, I believe, an error in paragraph 3.2, and given the legal importance of this report, it refers to the planning persimmon. Presumably that should be planning permission, and given that Persimmon are a housing developer, should that not be corrected?
Yep, happy for that. You're quite right. Thank you, Councillor Abbott. Councillor Euston.
Thank you, Chairman. Firstly, I was going to raise the persimmon comment, so thank you for that, Councillor Abbott. The second point was really a reflection of Councillor Mann's comment. It does seem strange that a fairly well-known charity should be reluctant to give information, and you have to wonder why. And the third point really is, what happens if a legitimate owner is found and comes forward and then says they don't want to sell the land to the developer? And that's the end of the comments. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Euston. Anyone else? No further comments? Okay. So it's down to Councillor Butland as the seconder, and nothing to add. Thank you. And back to Councillor Mrs. Spray.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. I fully support the comments made by Councillor Mann, and which were also picked up by Councillor Euston just now as to why answers to quite reasonable questions haven't been forthcoming. Well, I think that's a mystery to all of us, but we'll wait and see. Costs, yes, obviously we will do our best to recover any costs. Repairbrook have offered to cover reasonable costs, so that will be for a discussion a bit further down the line. Councillor Euston's other point about what happens if owners come forward and elect the Commission, I actually don't know the answer to that. That is probably something for the legal team to look at. I'm looking at Kim Mayor as I say that. Yeah, I don't know, but this is it's a very unusual situation, and we will have to see what comes out of the process. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Mrs Spray. So, members, the recommendations set out on page 182 of the agenda have been moved.
I apologise, Chairman. One other thing, the typo that Councillor Abbott picked up, yes, we will make sure that's corrected. Thank you.
Yeah, so I'll rephrase it because I've got it the wrong way around. So the recommendations as set out on page 182 of the agenda with the amendment have been moved and seconded. All those in favour, please indicate. That is unanimous. Thank you, members. The recommendations are approved. We'll now deal with agenda item 12 to receive a response to the recommendations from the Cost of Living Joint Scrutiny Report. Members, this item is set out on pages 192 to 202 of the agenda. Please can I invite Councillor Ritchie, Cabinet Member for Communities, to introduce the report and move the recommendations. And again, I remind you that before you make your speech, your recommendations must be seconded.
Thank you, Mr Chairman. Yeah, I'd like to move the recommendation as set out on page 192 of this evening's agenda, item 2.1. Thank you, Mr Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Ritchie. Can I have a seconder? Thank you, Councillor Bowers. Do you wish to reserve your right?
Yes, please.
Thank you. So I will invite Councillor Ritchie to speak on this item.
This report sets out our responses to the 22 recommendations from the Combined Scrutiny Committee report. I am unaware in my 10 years as a councillor of such a response to so many recommendations to a scrutiny report, and I would like to thank the council officers involved in the response, with special thanks to Housing and Communities, Environmental, Marketing and Comms, and the Economic Development team for such a comprehensive response and turnaround to the committee report, and the fact there is a credible response to every single recommendation. Members will recall that a combined scrutiny committee was tasked with conducting a review into the cost of living following a motion tabled at the council meeting on the 20th of June 2022. You will see from the responses that as a council we have worked with our partners and communities to pull together to support the most vulnerable within our district to ensure they are able to access information and guidance, warm spaces, food and activities. It is pleasing to see that within the district there are over 70 warm spaces that have now been established by the community and voluntary sector. These are now available via an interactive community map highlighting what is on offer, when and where. Community 360 have been supported by Braintree Village to provide 700 winter warmth bags, which are already being made available to vulnerable residents across the district. And I would like to acknowledge the fantastic work that Community 360 provide for our district. We have also delivered a member development evening so that we as councillors were kept up to speed with initiatives taking place within the district, allowing us to understand the work that is taking place and arming us with the knowledge to pass to groups within our wards, towns and parishes. Moving forward, we will, alongside our partners, continue to do all we can to support residents with the cost of living. This work and the response to the recommendations are not a fait accompli, and we will continue to adapt and support where we can. We have already delivered huge amounts to our communities, but we can always do better, and we will continue to support in the months ahead. Thank you, Mr Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Ritchie. Do any members wish to speak on this item? If so, please indicate. Councillor Garrett.
Thank you, Chairman. I very much welcome the Cabinet's response and am delighted with the cooperation and the collaborative work that's taken place to assist and protect the most vulnerable and those only just managing residents in our district. The main point I would like to make is how quickly this council acted to this crisis and the practical nature of that action taken. Alongside the Combined Scrutiny Committee, officers also engaged with partners to form the Cost of Living Partnership Group, which continues to meet regularly and is also building and also monitor developments, which I think is really good, because I think there will be difficulties as this crisis deepens, as predicted in 2023. This building is also now a food bank collection point, which was set up in December. The energy advice line managed by the Council Sustainability team has been very busy, and residents have found this service very helpful. And I'm delighted that Community 360, who organises the winter resilience packages, managed to get out 700 before Christmas and that dreadful cold snap that we had recently. We've seen a fantastic response to the initiation of the warm winter spaces, and the interactive map on the Council's website has been very favourably received. With the help of Essex County Council's funding, community groups and volunteers have really stepped up. I've opened a warm winter space myself in my own ward at Birdbrook Community House, and I know that this has got off to a really good start, with residents enjoying the social aspect enormously. And finally, I am really pleased that the Cabinet has responded to the committee's request to lobby the government to end the injustice of the prepayment meters. And I'm really grateful to the leader, Councillor Butland, for his efforts to get that letter out quickly in November. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Garrett. Councillor Abbott.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. First of all, I'd like to congratulate the Chairman of the committee for her work, and also for her very inclusive approach in delivering it. As a member of the joint scrutiny process, and also as a leader of the main opposition, which I think has in some part helped to prompt and has supported this process throughout, I'd like to also thank officers for their superb work and the detailed contributions from Essex County Council and the Citizens' Advice, which we heard at the joint scrutiny hearings. Also welcome the leaders' commitment at an early stage to go into great detail and put great effort into this. And as has been said, the Cabinet's detailed responses are to every single recommendation are to be welcomed, and particularly at recommendation 7, the cooperation over the warm spaces venues and activities, and the listing on the BDC website. Perhaps the one area of, I hope not contention, but the administration obviously will make their decision. At recommendation 11, the report does say that they would urge that the administration, that the council does not raise council tax by more than 1% for 23-24. We support that recommendation. We think the council should be looking to minimise the rise in council tax, which is an important element, as I said earlier on, about the impact of cost of living on our residents. Recommendation 16, opportunities for energy savings are mentioned. From my observations, they are often not progressed or simply ignored, and I think as a council, although we can only be an enabler in many instances, there is so much opportunity for energy saving. It is a bit of a hobby horse of mine, but just to give 2 examples, and this is not directly a council responsibility before anyone says it, but it's a good example. On the A12 between Whittam and Kelvedon, there have been 30 high-column streetlights on all day for 3 years. Now, I don't know how much energy that amounts to, but surely we should be rather concentrating on making sure energy is there for people who need it, such as vulnerable people in their homes, rather than wasting it like that. Similarly, with many private premises where floodlights are on all night and the control systems are available to avoid that. At recommendation 22, there is a need to review how the BDC website functions, including its search engine, to make it more user-friendly. I mean, I think that was something I raised previously, and Councillor McKee responded to, I believe, a year ago at the last, I don't know if he's listening at the minute, at the last, no worry, at the last budget scrutiny process, and he said he didn't think there was a problem with the new website. Some of us who use it think there is, in particular with the search engine, so if that can be improved, that would be welcome. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Abbott. Councillor Mrs Cunningham.
Thank you, Chairman. I think actually some of the responses that I was going to, or things that I was going to talk about, have already been responded to by Councillor Mrs Garrett and Councillor Abbott. But I think the response in terms of speed to the cost of living crisis has been excellent, both by the authority and the committee
that was set up to look at the issues, and I was a member of that committee. I think Councillor Mrs Garrett has put together a very detailed report along with the recommendations of the committee, and I know Councillor Mrs Garrett put a huge amount of research into it in such a short space of time, so I commend that. I've read with interest the response from Cabinet, and likewise that they have covered every recommendation thoroughly. I'll just pick out a couple of ones that particularly, one of them Councillor Mrs Garrett mentioned is the prepayment meters. That was a huge injustice, and the speed that has been addressed with the leader writing to the Secretary of State, I think that is to be hugely welcomed. Recommendation 5, that was a concern of mine, that people who were actually perhaps obviously vulnerable and suffering financial hardship, that may be tempted to take out an old piece of electrical equipment to keep warm, that now that we can look at partners hopefully to help with some free pack testing there. So yes, all in all, I think it's been a hugely good response, speedy response by Cabinet, and very welcome. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Mrs Cunningham. Any other members? No? So I'll turn to Councillor Bowers as the seconder, and reserving your right. Would you like to speak now?
Yes, thank you, Chairman. And as has been alluded to earlier tonight, obviously the rising cost of living crisis has been taken very seriously, an utmost priority, and the proposal presented earlier tonight by Councillor Butland shows that, as more than illustrated as well by the report before us tonight. And as also has been mentioned, the specific members' evening we had on this subject, and it's been such a speedy response from all. And as Councillor Ritchie said in his opening presentation, there's been such a widespread team effort from all departments within the authority, and we can see it in the report tonight how comprehensive the responses have been. I'd like to pay sort of tribute, as Councillor Ritchie mentioned, about the warm spaces, the winter water bags, community 360s involvement. It's also fair to say, with the cost of living crisis, there are some in more need than others in our district, and this report, the responses, as well as what has been announced tonight, will address that for the best benefits of the residents of the whole district at a time that is such challenging for all, and is going to be felt by the majority of our residents for months and potentially years to come. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Bowers. Councillor Ritchie, as the proposer of the recommendations, would you like to reply to the speeches before I put the recommendations to the vote?
Yes, I'll be very brief. Thank you, Chairman. So the first point, again, huge thanks to Councillor Garrett for heading up this. It was a mammoth piece of work, and as Councillor Mrs Mary Cunningham mentioned, I know that this was something that was very close to Councillor Garrett, and she did put in a lot of her own time and research in making sure that the topics that were spoken about had the right airtime and were responded to accordingly. I think she makes a really key point there that we need to monitor our responses and keep doing that on a regular basis to make sure that we are delivering for our residents. And just to make a point that my colleague Councillor Bowers made, I think the proposal by the leader this evening about putting in some additional funds to the cost of living just shows how seriously that we are taking this as an administration. A couple of points on Councillor Abbott. On the council tax, that will be considered in the February meeting, but absolutely everyone on this side of the room has a very keen eye on that process. Energy saving and lamp posts. There was a day burner outside of my property, so I reported it to EEC. I find that's the quickest way to get those addressed. And reference the website search engine. I'm sure my colleague Councillor McKee will take that away and discuss that with the IT team. And thank you for your kind words, Councillor Cunningham. I couldn't agree with you more about an outstanding scrutiny effort by everyone involved across this chamber in a non-political way. Again, Chairman, happy to move the recommendations. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Ritchie. Members, this report is for noting. Please can members indicate by show of hands that this report has been noted. Thank you, members. We'll now proceed to item 13, members' allowances for 2022 to 23. This item is set out on pages 203 to 206 of the agenda. Please can I invite Councillor Buckland, Leader of the Council, to introduce the report and move the recommendations. And can I remind you that before you make your speech, your recommendations must be seconded. Councillor Buckland.
I will formally move.
Seconded.
Thank you, Councillor McKee.
Right.
Do you wish to reserve your right?
I reserve the right.
Fair enough.
Okay. Chairman, you will be aware that for many years we've had a process for determining members' allowances in this council, whereby the independent remuneration panel has, towards the end of each administration, reviewed members' allowances, added new ones, taken old ones away, etc. But from then on, the following 4 years, any increases or not, as the case may be, have been in line with the local government award to staff. So that where our staff, if our staff got no increase, members' allowances didn't increase, and if there was a percentage increase in staff pay, the same percentage was applied to members. That seemed to be an incredibly easy way of doing things and worked very well. Unfortunately, this year, the local government pay settlement has been delivered differently. I'm not saying it's wrong, but it's been delivered differently. And rather than a set percentage across all staff, the pay award has a basic £1,925 payable to all staff. And as a result, of course, that is a higher percentage increase to those at the lower end compared to staff at the higher end. The lower end, it's round about 10.5% at the lower scale and round about 1.3% at the upper scale. So the issue was, given that our current members' allowance scheme says in paragraph 20.8 that the basic and the special responsibility allowances shall be increased in line with the local government staff annual pay award and in line with its provisions as to payment. That raised the issue of what should we do in respect of members' allowances for 2022-23. So this is the year beginning the 1st of April 22. Clearly, if we just added 1,925 to each member's allowance, that would be an increase of 37%. And if there is any member who wants to go out in a few months' time saying why we are worth an extra 37.5% in allowances, then good luck to them. On the other hand, if we took the average across our staff, it's still 6%. And I remind members, and Chairman, you will be aware, that there was 2% actually put into the budget for this year. Given the very many things that we've been talking about tonight and the challenges facing our constituents, the recommendation that I'm bringing before you tonight is that, one, we should agree to amend the Councillors' member allowance scheme at paragraph 20.8 by deleting the word shall in shall be increased to may be increased. That then means that clearly it doesn't have to be increased. And secondly, that we agree as a council that the members' allowance for 22-23 will not be increased in line with the local government staff pay award, and indeed will not be increased at all, but will remain at the rates agreed by council on the 19th of April 2021, and that the new administration make arrangements for how future years may be reviewed post the May elections in 2023. So the recommendation, Chairman, to agree the change in the Council of Members Allowance Scheme to enable us then to accept that there will be no increase in members' allowances in 22-23. I so move.
Thank you, Councillor Bartlett. Do any members wish to speak on this item? Please. raise your hand and indicate to him now. Councillor Abbott.
Thank you. Yes, our group discussed this and we're supportive of this proposal. It's the right thing to do at the time and in the circumstances. The only thing I'd add is that whatever the flavour of the new administration, we believe it would be good to have a very thorough review of the members' allowances when the opportunity arises, and particularly the special responsibility allowances, so that they're closely geared to the amount of extra work put in. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Allen. Councillor Pritchard.
Thank you, Chairman. Just a quick one. On the paragraph 3.8, I'm just wondering whether we're leaving ourselves open by the cynic to suggest that that then gives us the opportunity to increase members' allowance above any flat awarded percentage, and whether we ought to lock out that paragraph a little bit tighter to avoid that happening, or that cynical view being taken. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Pritchard. Councillor Cunningham.
Thank you, Chairman. Just to add, totally support the proposal on the order paper in front of us this evening. Councillor Abbott makes some points about the remuneration and remuneration for special responsibilities in a comprehensive review. What I would say is, having been a panel member on the last review, which was before the 2019 elections, which involved an expert panel, a very thorough piece of work, and involved members who were executive members, non-executive members, and opposition members. I would like to say to colleagues that I would hope they would have faith in the process that has been carried out in the past and that may be carried out in the future. And actually, the last remuneration review did highlight some anomalies with some of our special responsibility allowances. I think particularly around the vice chairmanship of planning and vice chairmanship of licensing, those two quasi-judicial committees, and indeed the vice chairman of the council as well, where quite a lot of additional responsibility is taken by those vice chairmen in support of the chairman, and actually that process did acknowledge that extra work in a very thorough and appropriate way. So I think, just for new colleagues, I would just like to put out there that I think the process, when it is done, hopefully will be done comprehensively and involve all sides. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Cunningham. Any other members wish to speak? No. Councillor McKee, you reserved your right.
Nothing to add, Chair.
Thank you. So, Councillor Butland, as proposer of the recommendation, would you like to reply to speeches?
Just on the points that have been raised, they're all very appropriate points. It will be up to the new administration to determine new council, what terms of reference it gives to the independent remuneration body to consider when doing it. And so the points about appropriateness of work could be one thing. Picking up on Councillor Pritchard's point of view, I can assure him, through you, Chairman, that we aren't going to change our minds tomorrow and suddenly say, well, now it's May, we can do whatever we like. There will be no increase until such time as I can't say it. If I have anything to do with it, there will be no increase until such time as the independent remuneration panel has responded to the terms of reference that it's been given by this council post-May. And therefore I ask council to support the recommendations.
Thank you, Councillor Butland. Well, members, the recommendations set out on page 203 of the agenda have been moved and seconded. All those in favour, please indicate. That is unanimous. Thank you, members. The recommendations are approved. We'll now proceed to agenda item number 14, which is the Council Committee and Constitution update. Members, this item is set out on pages 207 to 211 of the agenda. Please can I invite Councillor Butland, Leader of the Council, to introduce the report and move the recommendations. And again, can I remind you that before me making your speech, your recommendations must be seconded.
I will move and then speak.
Thank you. And can I have a seconder?
Seconded, Mr. Chairman, and reserve the right. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Cunningham.
Thank you, Chairman. There are 3 points in this report. One, to note the effect of the elections of our two new colleagues in November on the political membership of the council. Members will be aware that the number of members from each political group on some of the, not all our committees, but on some of the committees are determined under what known as the Widdicombe rules, depending on the overall numbers across the chamber. That is exercise is carried out by the head of governance and monitoring. The head of governance. That has been done, and as you see in paragraph 3, as a result of 3.6, as a result of the proportions being recalculated, it does not change the number of committee, and that should be seats as opposed to Cs, allocated to each political group. So there is no need for any changes to be made in regard to the number of places for each of the 4 recognised groups on this council. There is one proposed committee membership change, and that is on the Governance and Audit Scrutiny Committee, where Councillor Vanessa Santamuro will be standing down, and Councillor Mary Cunningham is the proposed replacement member. The third area is on officer delegations. Hopefully people have read that. There's a lot of numbers and Y's and N's around, etc., Y's around in the report. It's merely to show that at the moment a number of the environments have been going to really levels of responsibility which they don't need to do for fairly straightforward environments. And so set out in the paper from paragraph 3.8 are the officer delegation capital environments are set out there in the report. And therefore, as a result, Chairman, I would move the recommendations. One, in 2.1, to note the political membership of the council, and the fact that it has no impact now upon the membership of committees. Secondly, to note the change in membership on the Governance and Audit Committee. And then 3 recommendations to agree to delegate authority to the Section 151 officer to approve a capital environment of up to the value of 150,000. Secondly, to agree to delegate authority to the Council's Section 106 monitoring officer to approve the allocation of identified Section 106 monies held by the Council to specific projects up to the value of 25,000. And third, to agree that delegated authority to the Section 151 officer to approve the allocation of identified Section 106 monies held by the Council to specific projects that exceed 25,000. I so move, Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Blackburn. Do any members wish to speak on this item? Councillor Parker.
Sorry, thanks, Chairman. I've just been looking at paragraph 3.10, and just there is no provision for a payment of 250,000. Do you see it goes from 249.999 to over 250,000? Just a minor point there.
I'll ask the Mayor to explain.
Thank you very much, Councillor Parker. In terms of the table, the last one, which refers to over 250, that's 250 and above. And I can make that wording more clear in the Constitution when I update it.
Thank you. Any other members? So we'll go to... So Councillor Cunningham, having reserved your right?
Nothing to add, thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. And Councillor Butland?
If Council are happy for the monitoring officer to, the governance officer to change that, tidy up that little bit as to whether it's 150,000 to 250,000, as it is in the previous table, that would seem to me to be the simplest way and keeps it consistent across. Can I help? That will be, yeah, we've been in a bit of trouble if we had that, 99.50 pence. But with that, I move the motion, move the recommendations.
Thank you, Councillor Canning. Councillor Butler, sorry. So, members, we are asked to note the political membership of the council and approve the recommendations set out on page 207 of the agenda, which has been moved and seconded, and therefore I'll take all that as one vote. All those in favour, please indicate. Thank you, members. That is unanimous. The recommendations are approved. We'll now proceed to agenda item 15, Cabinet's report to full council.
I'd like to move standing orders for an extension of 15 minutes to cover questions, and in particular because reference was made in an earlier item to being able to ask questions of the leader in this section.
Does that find a seconder? Right. And how many members agree? If you can do show of hands, okay. All those against? Any abstentions? The motion has been lost, and we therefore have 3 minutes left for this item. So, yeah, it doesn't give any time for it really at all, does it? So, Councillor Pritchard.
Oh, sorry, I thought you were looking for...
So, right, so Councillor Butland, if I could invite you to introduce the report, please.
Chairman, I introduce the report. Clearly, if there are any questions which are not covered tonight, they can be put in writing and we will respond to members, and members will get the copies of the answers. I so move.
Thank you, Councillor Butland.
You've got a couple of minutes to take a few questions.
I've got 2 minutes. Okay, so I've got 2 minutes. I'll go straight to Councillor Abbott then.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. 3 questions I'll get through them. First one to Councillor Rickey. I think it's relevant to him. He mentioned in his report winter resilience. Was the Cabinet member aware that many communities were left for days facing heavily iced footways, and I had reports of people falling during the week of the very cold weather in December? Essex County Council only generally grip main route roads, and whilst Parish Council and volunteers do what they can, far too many footways were left dangerously icy. Does he agree that a cross-authority review is needed of how authorities and agencies can better prepare for cold snaps so that footways are safe to use and people are not forced to walk in the road?
Thank you, Councillor Abbott. So, gritting falls under the responsibility of Essex County Council with regards to any individual areas. I know that the parish of Great Notley takes up Essex County Council's kind offer of a tonne of salt to be allocated to the parish council, and then it's distributed accordingly for those that might want to use it, or for anyone that can distribute it within the area. And also, as in non-parish areas?
County councils and parish areas.
Because that covers the whole remit, not just parish councils, unparished areas too. Thank you.
Yeah, well, I'm aware of that, and Rivenhall does as well, but people can only do so much, and many footways were left in an appalling state. Second question is to Councillor Gabriel Spray. In welcoming that BDC has applied for Rule 6 status to the Rivenhall Airfield appeal regarding the Essex County Council Condition 66 decision, and we very much agree with her in her report that the developer should be required to develop as per the long-standing integrated facility consent. Has she got a view as to the fact that Essex County Council has stated in terms that it will not take enforcement action against the developer's endeavour for continuing to build out the site, whilst endeavour has stated in terms, in public, they will not build to the integrated design?
Thank you, Chairman. I will provide a written response to that question, but through you, Chairman, Councillor Abbott is aware that there is an appeal forthcoming, not as early as we like, should have been held this month, but the inspector's unable to deal with it, so it's been rescheduled for May, which is incredibly, well, I don't need to say, do I? The dates are 2nd, 3rd and 4th of May for this appeal to be heard. Nothing we can do about that. So there is appeal forthcoming, so I don't think it's appropriate for me to comment further tonight on that, but I will see if there's any further information via written response I can give you.
Thank you, Councillor Spray. And with that response, the time allocated has expired, and therefore we conclude this item. So any questions, members, as you know, you can ask at any time, put in a question in writing, and a response will be answered within 10 working days and shared with all members. So, members, there are no further business items on the agenda, so thank you for getting through them all. Please may I ask members to remain quiet and seated for a few more minutes just whilst I formally close the meeting. You are still on the YouTube broadcast, and people do write in because they do like to see the meeting conclude. So this concludes our business for this meeting of full council, and before closing the meeting, can I remind members that the next meeting of full council will be held on the 20th of February 2023. The webcast of this meeting will be published on the council's YouTube channel as soon as possible. And members, if you have any feedback following this evening's meeting, can you provide this directly to Emma Wisby or Kim Mayo, who can consider it for future council meetings. Thank you, members, for your attendance and participation this evening. And to those watching on the council's YouTube channel, I close this meeting at 22:16. Thank you.